OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball.
Very good morning, welcome along to Thursday morning's OTB AM, the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. We're here with you live until 10 o'clock this morning. Loads coming up between now and 10 o'clock. We've got Meabh De Burca looking ahead to the Republic of Ireland versus France in the women's game tonight at Tallaght Stadium, 7:45pm kickoff. Of course, as the team head off to Australia tomorrow. Plenty of interesting stuff out of the press conference as well yesterday that we will get into with Vera Pauw. Barry Hennessy, not with Vera Pauw. Of course, they were chatting to Vera Pauw at the press conference. Katie McCabe was there as well. But we'll discuss that with Meabh De Burca a little bit later on the show. Barry Hennessy and Tony Regan will preview Galway versus Limerick in the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship semi-final this weekend. We'll of course look ahead further to the Clare-Kilkenny game on tomorrow morning's show. Jess Kelly is back from Wimbledon. She's been using some AI over there for some robotic commentary, so we'll hear how all that was for her. And Paul Howard's version, an episode of You Had to Be There, all to come at around about 9 o'clock this morning. Really looking forward to that one. Some really interesting picks from Paul, it has to be said. And Tim Vickery, some highlights from last night's show at 9:30. We'll have live commentary, by the way, of the Ireland-France game tonight with Nathan Murphy alongside Pearl Slattery. But we will first say good morning to Kathleen McNamee and to Colm Buhig. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Shane and Kathleen.
How are we keeping?
Very well.
Oh, good.
Very well. Excited about Paul Howard's You Had to Be There. Very
picks.
excited about that.
We can't ruin the picks yet, can we?
No, I wouldn't think so, but they are very good. They're excellent.
I will say this.
The most prepared man in the world.
He is.
Gave me those picks like over a month ago now at this stage.
And did he give them to you in the order that was correct, or did you reassemble them?
No, he gave it to me exactly.
This guy,
and he actually didn't even need that much of an explanation. Like normally you need to like talk people through the exact details that you want, and he was just like, here you go.
Do you know what I mean? The one thing I will say about it is, and it's a minor spoiler, there is a snooker pick. There is a snooker pick.
What a snooker pick.
And what a snooker pick.
Yeah.
So I was obviously buzzing for this one. I was like, yeah.
And I think the second most entered You Had to Be There concludes Paul's list.
You think it's the second?
I think so.
I was the first, maybe.
Oh, do you? I think the
I think
other
Katie
one.
Taylor has been mentioned.
Well, that's not a spoiler because Katie Taylor isn't included.
Not
I think
included.
that's the most entered, but this might be the second most. Please bring up the article about Paul Howard's dog.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
Because I haven't seen this. What's this about? This is about Paul Howard's beagle.
In 2018, Paul wrote about his beagle. I hope Paul's listening now.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, I'm not going to read an article about someone writing about their dog.
Yeah.
Then I read it and I was like, absolutely in after paragraph 1. By paragraph 2, I was howling. It's just
Laughing,
brilliant.
howling.
Yeah, it's like the most stubborn dog in the world, and gave examples of how he couldn't train him properly. Then months later, was in Dunleary, saw the same breed of dog, and I was like, oh, that reminds me of that article. And then followed the dog up the lead to the owner, who was Paul Howard.
I've
never been starstruck by a dog before.
Yeah, actually, funny. I still have never been starstruck by a dog.
It could happen to you. Well, I mean, I don't think it would either.
Also, just to correct the record, it's actually a Basset Hound.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I look at
It says
there.
it in the first line of the article.
Is it? That was 2018, like 5 years ago. Yeah, I can see it here next to me. People should honestly read it. I don't have a dog. I found it great.
What was Paul's entry into the Culture Club? Remember we had the Culture Club during COVID? Was it?
Oh yeah, that's right.
It wasn't Colombo, was it?
Yeah, that rings a vague bell.
Someone random did Colombo, and he said he
could have
visited.
been him.
I think it was Paul. No, I stand to be corrected, Paul. If I'm wrong, apologies. But certainly someone random in my head.
It was a good series.
Was a very big fan of Colombo.
I always like when we're talking to someone on the show and we're like apologising to them or addressing them as if they're listening, and I just find it funny the idea of they're not listening at all and we're just talking into a void.
Yes, it's true.
As if someone is being insulted and we don't even know.
I am correct, by the way. Paul Howard added Colombo to the OTB Culture Hall of Fame in 2020.
May that be your epitaph. I am correct, by the way.
Just one more thing, as Colombo might say himself in a trench coat. Yeah, because he said he visited Colombo's grave, or Peter Falk's grave. Colombo, of course, being a fictional character. But Peter Falk.
You sure of that?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure. Another guy whose autograph I have, Peter Falk, the actor who played Colombo.
Oh yeah,
You're going to say Colombo?
Yeah.
Before we get on to the actual sport, how many autographs do you have?
Thousands.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, the gaff at home. If there's ever a fire or something, touch wood, I should really put them away. So
Yeah, bring them in.
I'll bring a few of them and show and tell.
Scatter them there around the studio.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I haven't got your autographs yet, guys. You're both
Mine's inconsistent.
public figures, is it?
It's literally different every time.
See, I like someone who has a consistent signature. Not saying I don't like you, but work on that, please.
Your ones that are on the
Good
whiteboard
though.
outside are pretty consistent, apart from whenever you do it with different hands.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to show off, that I couldn't or could write with both hands.
Do you know when I was in school, my teachers always used to think I was faking notes because my dad's signature is so bad. It's literally just like a circle and another like loop.
I love it.
And like, I'm not going to say it on air, but our doctor had a slightly unfortunate name, and they also thought that I was making that up whenever I had doctor's
really?
notes, and I was like, no, that's literally his name, and that is actually my dad.
Mad to know the name now, but obviously you can't reveal on air. I used to, my mum's signature was quite easy to copy, but I used to tell her I was copying it. So like, instead of just taking the job, I said, Mum, can I just do this? She was like, yeah, go on. Sorry, Mum, but I shouldn't be really out here like this. But it was with her full permission. I wasn't just...
Send in your best signatures there.
Yeah, send in your signatures. I used to practice signatures when I was a kid, but yeah, I have loads of sporting signatures. I think, Franz Beckenbauer
Again, such a classic Shane line. I used to practice signatures when I was a kid.
I used to send it away from them, and I was like, what if I have to ever write a signature? And I used to practice.
What did you decide on as your favourite sort of signature?
Favourite sort of signature?
Like, do you like a big loopy doctor style sort of one, or are you more like intricate with
to
it?
Describe it, like aesthetically pleasing. Like Donald Trump has a signature that looks bonkers, as you can like. Sometimes signatures suit personalities. It's like a, what do you call the graph, that your heart rate monitor? It's just a squiggle.
Heart graph.
Like it's I couldn't think of that one on the spot. It's essentially just a squiggle. So sometimes people's signatures are just hilarious. Sometimes Michael Caine's is like, I have that at home, and it's like M line.
It's all a scam.
C line.
Everyone, you just start off with the first letter of your first name, which is fine, and then you just go mad after that. Like, it doesn't actually matter. And also, the madder you go, the more it seems to be respected. Like, it's a whole scam, signatures.
It's all a bit mad. There'll be a few signatures dished out at Tallaght Stadium tonight after the match, because of course they're heading off to Australia tomorrow for the Women's World Cup. Really excited. I know the French game is probably going to be slightly tougher than the Zambia match, to say the least.
I would
the
assume
fifth
so.
in the world. So I mean, like, I understand I guess the thinking behind this, Kathleen, is play really, really tough teams, and that's been Vera Pauw's plan all along, I guess.
Yeah, like she has said all along that she wants to play the toughest opponents, because otherwise the team won't be properly prepared. And she said like quite a few times that that's why Ireland have struggled in the past, is that they haven't actually put themselves up against the best opposition. She's also very particular in like the teams that she picks. Say like in the last couple of months in the build up to the World Cup, every team has had a particular reason why she's played them. So like China, Zambia, Germany, France, they all like fill different criteria that suit the teams in our World Cup group, even if it's just certain elements of it. So yeah, tonight's gonna be interesting. I'm interested to see what team Vera puts out. I asked her yesterday in the press conference. Everyone's fit, so everyone's willing to play, and I was like, how close is it going to be to the starting 11? And she was like, well, we're treating this match as a competitive game. We're going out to win. We're not. It's a very different situation to say like Zambia, where she was trying to get an idea of who was playing well and who was going to be in the actual squad. But she also said that that doesn't necessarily mean that the team will stay that way as well. So she was saying that because of the way they're doing like periodization to make sure that all the players get to the same spot at the same time, because everyone's coming. Championship players finished like a couple of months ago. Players like Katie McCabe only came in a couple of weeks ago. Denise O'Sullivan, this is like her first week in camp. So she was saying that there are some players that might only play like 30 minutes. There are other players who might play the full 90. While it is a competitive game, it's still a build up to the World Cup, so we're not going to see like absolutely everything that we can expect from that first game in Sydney.
It's regardless of it being a friendly, and I was thinking, like, because they're flying out tomorrow, can you imagine the trepidation of these players heading into a 50-50 challenge tonight? It's like, and of course if you pull out, you tend to get injured, so you really have to go for it. But
worse.
Yeah, exactly. But you could, any old kind of stupid injury where you haven't warmed up to 100% efficiency, and you could do a hamstring, and it must be on tenterhooks. And at the same time, you're playing against the 5th best team in the world according to the FIFA rankings. Who have playing for your place, who have played in 5 World Cups themselves, France versus Ireland 0. Like, it's a huge disparity, and like just 17 places between these sides in the rankings. Again, if rankings are important to you, and only 5 of this Irish squad have actually played against France before. Right. So it's new for the majority, and on paper this is actually Ireland's toughest task in the next month. you know. But of course, being a friendly, like France are going to be in the same boat as Ireland. Everyone is. They don't want to get injured, especially the star players. So you're hoping for a bit of rotation. And I guess the only thing you're hoping for tonight is two things. Obviously, is a good performance and promising football, but also not to get hammered. You don't want to leave. You don't want to leave the country with a drubbing. But I don't think that's going to happen.
No, surely not. I'm just checking here to see. So France are 5th in the world rankings, and the rest of our group, Canada 7th, Australia 10th, and then ourselves, of course, in 22nd.
Nigeria like 40 something, right?
Okay, they're 40th. Yeah. So okay, yes, Canada are the highest ranked. Like, are France? It's probably a stupid question to ask because of course they are. But are France legitimate World Cup contenders here, Kathleen?
I think yes. I think France technically should have been World Cup contenders or even Euro contenders for the last couple of years, but they've had such a complicated situation with their former manager Corinne Diacre, who like the 2019 World Cup, it was held in France. It was supposed to be like a watershed moment for that French team, but she isolated so many of the top players, like Eugénie Le Sommer, like she's the top French scorer, despite what people will try and tell you about the men's side. She hasn't played for the last couple of years because she fell out with Diacre. You had like Amandine Henry, who was like the captain. She also fell out with Diacre. They've had, so like Wendy Renard, before the whole tournament started, said that she wasn't going to play the World Cup under Diacre, and then within a week Diacre was gone and Renard was back in the squad. So this is like the first year in a long time that we're actually going to properly see what this French team are capable of. They still have some quite big injuries, but also they've known about those for a couple of months. They're like ACLs that were done last summer towards the end of autumn, so they've had time to prepare for it. And they have some really, really talented young players coming up too. So I think they're probably an unknown quantity to a certain extent, but definitely one of the teams that I would see doing quite well in the tournament if they're able to get their act together.
Wouldn't be the French without a little bit of carnage in the build-up in the year before World Cup. So for people unfamiliar, like Diacre, who you mentioned, was sacked following a player of revolt. So Wendy Renard, Marie-Antoinette Katoto, Kadiatou Diani, among those who threatened to walk away unless Diacre was sacked. I think it was over his approach to dealing with players, and he was sacked. Hervé Renard comes in March, like just months before a World Cup, which isn't exactly ideal to have a manager coming in that late. Hervé Renard is, of course, that dapper-looking gentleman who managed Saudi Arabia in their famous win over Argentina at the Men's World Cup.
He's such an interesting appointment because he doesn't have any experience in the women's game, and I know people will say football is football, but there are different things that you kind of need for either side, and people can manage both. That's absolutely no problem at all, but from what I know, he has limited to no experience managing a women's team. But the way he came in, he was actually really impressive with some of the stuff. He automatically introduced a policy where any of the players in the team who were mothers could bring their babies into camp, and he was like, why wouldn't I do that? I mean, if they're distracted, they're not going to play well on the pitch, so we should be doing everything we can to support them. And it was
yeah,
it's just, he's such an intriguing figure.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and just the fact that he's only had months as well. 4 months now to deal with that. I can't really talk about France going into the World Cup with carnage after Saipan 2002, I guess. And also, we should turn to this story because the press conference yesterday wasn't exactly dominated by matters football. It was matters off the pitch. Back to the Irish Independent, McCabe, Powell's new deal is not up to me. Ireland captain Katie McCabe has said it's not up to her to decide whether Vera Powell gets a contract extension beyond this month's World Cup. The manager saying last month that both she and the FAI were engaged in talks, and she hoped that the discussions could be concluded before the commencement of the World Cup. And of course there's these fresh allegations emerging this week on a US website about her time at the Houston Dash, the FAI appearing to have stalled on negotiations. So that seems to have been what's dominated the press conference yesterday. Someone is out to get me, says Vera Powell in the back of the Irish Daily Star. Powell believes person with an agenda is trying to destroy her. Powell claims the allegations made against her last December and in an article published earlier this week are down to an agenda by one person who is, quote, trying to destroy my career. She was heavily pressed on this issue yesterday, the contents of an interview conducted with unnamed former Houston Dash players and staff members that appeared in The Athletic on Monday morning. And all the rest of the papers are dealing with this issue as well. Kathleen, this was an issue that cropped up heavily at the press conference at which you were present yesterday.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been in a press conference that was quite as tense as that, and I have done Mourinho and Guardiola press conferences before, which are just tense on an average day. It was Yeah, like Vera came out very strong at the start, and like she has always vehemently denied any allegations against her, and the press conference yesterday pretty much followed the same tune. There was a bit of discussion before as to who the player would be that would be put up to, I suppose, represent what the team were thinking. No surprise that it was Katie McCabe. When these allegations first came out before Christmas, it was Katie that was up there as well. It was probably like half an hour of the two of them being asked the same question or very, very similar questions over and over again, and the two of them getting continuously more frustrated with it. Like even at the end, Katie was very, very visibly frustrated at the fact that there was so little talk about the match tonight, or the fact that they're flying off to the first ever World Cup. But it's hard as well in those situations because, yeah, you can ask those questions, but also the story that everyone wants to know about is the article that was written this week. And I suppose yesterday was like Vera's first opportunity to actually address the media about it and give her side straight from her mouth, rather than, you know, the quotes and the information that she gave in the article. But yeah, strenuously denied all the allegations. McCabe was asked, did the whole squad support her? And she said yes. And then it was kind of followed up, and someone asked her, well, do you speak for the entire squad? And she was like, well, obviously I can't speak for everyone individually. So there was a bit of, I suppose, not clarity there. And when Vera was asked, because it was one of the questions that was raised in Off the Ball during the week, have you talked to the players, or has the FAI talked to the players? She said that she's talked to the senior leadership, and that each one of the senior leaders came to her individually and offered their support. Now, obviously, that's coming from her rather than the actual players, so you have to take it at her word. But yeah, it was... I don't know, I feel like we've spent so much of this World Cup build-up talking about things other than the football and just being able to get excited about it, and it's incredibly frustrating. And I feel like the FAI could have done a much better job at handling this situation. It shouldn't be up to Katie McCabe or any of the other players to stand up and have to speak for the entire squad or answer questions about why the FAI acted one way or the other. That should be on the FAI. They should have had more clarity in their processes in this whole thing, and that hasn't been there. And it's only going to get worse, because when we get to the World Cup, the Australian media is going to want to ask about it, the Canadian media is going to want to ask about it. You know, yesterday's press conference ended and we all kind of went like, okay, that's over. But the next thing we were all thinking was, okay, well, when we get over to Brisbane, Sydney, Perth, we're just going to have to sit through this again and again.
100%.
And there definitely would have been a way to approach this where there'd be less questions swirling around and we'd be able to focus on the actual football. For
anyone who has been living under a rock, so the comments in the and Vera Pauw was interviewed for this Athletic piece that was released on Monday. She claims she received a death threat from a member of the Houston Dash staff after she switched training to the evening to avoid the daytime heat. She said in the piece, he threatened to shoot me in the head as I was taking his beer night away, adding she got police protection until that situation was resolved. This all started back in December. Vera Pauw was named in a report which alleged that while she was manager, Vera Pauw, of Houston Dash from November 2017 to September 2018, she shamed players for their weight and attempted to exert excessive control of their eating habits. Pauw denied every allegation made against her, and as Kathleen said, continues to deny those allegations up to and including yesterday. A month later then, she was among 8 coaches sanctioned by the NWSL. That's the National Women's Soccer League in North America, as part of their corrective action in response to the findings of the report. Her future employment in the NWSL is conditional on acknowledging misconduct, participating in training and demonstrating a sincere commitment to correcting behaviour. And then Pauw herself responded to those sanctions, saying she was in contact with an Iowa-based employment discrimination and civil rights lawyer and vowed to fully clear her name. And then of course this piece on Monday, not only was Pauw interviewed for that piece, but it chronicled her time at Houston Dash. 4 ex-players and 3 former members of staff, all interviewed under the cover of anonymity, discussed what they said Pauw's methods. They described them as, quote, abusive and inappropriate. Another said she, quote, created a culture of fear. So I guess the article on Monday is why this can of worms has been reopened. I know Joe Malloy spoke at length about this on the show during the week. I think Joe's points were fair. I know he probably took a little bit of heat from some people, for some of them, because of the timing out of the World Cup, but like,
I would also say that anyone who, I know like the Joe's monologue was put out, but I would also encourage anyone who watched that and was giving Joe a bit of heat to actually listen to the interview he did with the two authors of the article, because he properly interrogated them. And you know, a lot of people were saying he was anti-Vera and anti the Ireland squad and anti the World Cup, but if you listen to that interview in the context of what he said, that's not the case at all. It's an interrogation of the situation, because the fact is we don't know. We only know what has been reported and what Vera has said and what the players have said in the media, so that's all we're going off, and we can only just keep asking those questions as well.
It's one, and as you say, Kathleen, we don't know the truth, and Joe said that himself as well. It could come out, and I guess Joe's issue, and it's a very fair one, is how the FAI have dealt with this. You can't just say you've spoken to Vera Pauw and spoken to one or two players. And I also think Vera Pauw is saying, she's spoken to the senior leadership group. I actually think she should be speaking to every single player individually. I don't think it's that difficult.
But again, like, it's also not on her to talk to them, in the sense that if your boss comes to you and says, do you have a problem with me?
Yeah, I get you.
You're probably not going to tell them, whereas like that's the one thing that came out of the joint investigation that was done in the NWSL, was that like things don't actually come to light unless there is an independent, anonymous way of reporting things. Because face it, we're going into a World Cup. If you actually had an issue with Vera Pauw, you're not going to turn around and be like, I have an issue, and she's going to be like, well, you're not going to the World Cup, or whatever. She might not say that, but
it feels like there's a simmering tension, right? And I was watching all of the videos that Kathleen posted on her Twitter from the press conference yesterday. I was glued to all of them, but one in particular was Katie McCabe's response to the whole thing. We
have that video. It's slightly longer than we usually play. It's a couple of minutes, but we think it's worth it for the response. So this was the Irish captain, Katie McCabe, discussing all these issues at the press conference yesterday. Have a look.
Of course, it's a real negative distraction, but for us, we're solely focusing on what we have going forward. We have a game against one of the top 5 teams in the world tomorrow here in Tallaght Stadium against France. A massive send-off game in front of our home fans that I wasn't able to play 2 weeks ago, so I'm really looking forward to be able to lead out the girls tomorrow with that. And we've got a massive 4 or 5 weeks ahead of us in Australia, and for us, yes, of course, it's a lot of external noise, but our fully focus is on these next few weeks and keeping together as a group.
And as a group, do you fully support Vera Pauw as your manager?
Yeah, we've built something over the last 2.5 years, we've worked really hard together to contain the culture we have within the group, in terms of on and off the pitch. We've had highs and we've had lows over the last few years, and our jobs as staff and as players is to put in high quality performances for our country, and that's what we'll be looking to do for the next few weeks.
And would you say that you speak for the whole team, all 23, they're happy with Vera Pauw's answer to those allegations?
I can't answer for each and every player. Of course, Vera has a style of management that we're used to now over the last 2 years. It's something we've worked together. We've argued with each other, of course. Like, you're never going to get on 100% with your manager at times. She pushes me and I push her. So, in my opinion, and from my personal relationship with Vera, of course, we've clashed many times, but we're always professional enough to make sure we are fully focused for the team. And we know both of our hearts are in the right place in terms of wanting what's best for the Ireland women's national team going forward. And again, of course, the article timing is not great, but our full focus will be France tomorrow, and then going into Colombia next week, and then obviously kicking off our first ever World Cup.
Interesting. Good answer. Yeah, Katie McCabe, very, very interesting. You're obviously trying to read into body language and what Katie McCabe is also saying there, but I guess as she says, she can't speak for all of the players, the rest of the players in the squad. She can only speak for herself, which I think is fair.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I've had this argument a couple of times over since yesterday happened. She is the captain as well. Like, I know she can say she can't speak for every player, but she is by being up there and answering these questions, she is speaking on behalf of the squad.
But I do think in any squad, say a squad of 23 players, you're going to have maybe you could have 16 players who love the manager and 8 players who despise the manager. I've done terrible maths there. 7 players who maybe despise the manager. But you know what I mean? Like the entire squad. She may be the captain, but she may be getting different opinions herself, and I have no idea.
True. That's true. So her answer was like totally understandable, but she could have worded it in a way that was like exactly like you said. It was like, well, naturally in a squad of that size, not everyone's going to be happy with the manager, but there's clearly clearly a tension between the two of them, I think, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I do think they get the best out of each other, but you can feel like I thought McCabe had a few opportunities there to really kind of embellish just how much like Vera Pauw has done for Irish football and how brilliant she is as a manager. But I thought her answer was very interesting.
Yeah,
I thought it was very revealing. Well, she did and she didn't. I think she gave her due credit. I think there's respect there for sure. I don't know if there's much beyond that.
But it is funny because the two of them did the panel with us at the Mansion House last week. I know you guys weren't there, but like their body language and the way they were talking was very, very different to yesterday as well, because obviously at that stage the article hadn't come out. Yes, the allegations were still there, but they kind of left the public consciousness a little bit, I think, and there definitely was like much more ease between the two of them. And well, I'm not even going to say between the two of them, but much more ease, because obviously yesterday was a very tense and difficult day.
Yeah, it's one of those strange ones. And look, they had to address it yesterday. And you know, at the end of the press conference, I think Katie McCabe was basically like, what she had a passing comment about thanks for talking about the World Cup, or
thanks for covering the World Cup.
The World Cup, and look, I understand her frustration that you know we're literally a day out from the team leaving for the World Cup, and we're talking about this, but she has to understand, Katie McCabe, that this is the media, this is what happens. It's look, if something like this comes into that's why you have to talk about it.
That's why it was so tense, I think, because we are so close to the World Cup. We're on the eve of Ireland's first World Cup. No one wants to say anything that's going to jeopardise what's about to happen on the pitch. So I thought the tension was just fascinating to watch, and I did think it was revealing and a good thing again that McCabe admitted that we do disagree all the time. She pushes me and I pushes her, because if she was like no, everything's fine, no one's going to believe that.
She said that quite consistently as well over the last couple of months. Like that's always been a thing between the two of them.
I think McCabe's type of character who can't help but be honest. And I think she wears her emotions on her face a bit like Vera Pauw, and they're actually probably quite similar characters in terms of their insane drive and competitiveness. So I think they'll bring the best out of each other, but it'll be fascinating down the line to see, you know, if they're asked again about each other. When they no longer work together.
There's going to be like a magnificent profile or piece on these couple of weeks, and like I say a couple of years, it could even be like in a year's time, where someone deep dives into what every single player, like a lot of the players, were feeling over these last couple of weeks. Everything from the World Cup to the allegations to, you know, how they felt watching everything unfold in front of them and doing like a proper undercover. I genuinely look forward to reading it whenever it happens.
For sure. We should mention before we leave the arena of football, Mason Mount yesterday securing and confirming that signing from Manchester United, or to Manchester United from Chelsea, initial £55 million, 5-year deal, an 18-year association with Chelsea ending. He had put up a nice video saying goodbye and farewell to the Chelsea fans yesterday. Of course, won the Champions League with Chelsea in 2021. First summer signing for Eric Ten Hag, and he will wear the iconic number 7 shirt at Old Trafford. No pressure with that jersey.
Big one. And he can play about 7 different positions. So the worry is like where's he going to play?
Is that the only reason he deserves the jersey?
Where's he going to play, like, because his best position is probably central attacking, which is taken by Bruno Fernandes. So he could drop deeper to play alongside Casemiro, because Marcel Sabatzer's loan deal ended and they're not signing him permanently.
And Eriksen can't really complete 90
Christian
minutes.
Eriksen isn't so fit. Fred, the jury's very much out.
McTominay is bashing things up for Scotland, though.
I don't think Ten Hag's the biggest McTominay fan. So it'll be interesting to see where he plays. It's not the most inspiring thing. £60 million. Chelsea want to get rid of a lot of their players, and they're continuing to do so. It's a decent signing.
Decent.
Well, let's see.
You guys sound so unconvinced by this.
I mean, very open about it.
Well, I said last week, I think for the price, I prefer Mount at this price than Rice for his price. I know that the money is irrelevant.
I believe you're still saying. I thought you would have had time to think about it. Well, there you go, and he's about to sign for Arsenal.
We'll find out next season who is the better signing.
Well, I find Kathleen, I'm a lot more excited because they're about to sign Declan Rice.
Arsenal. Are you excited about Declan Rice?
Come on.
No, I am excited. I do I think he is a sort of player that could work really well under Arteta. I think he's the sort of player we need. I like the fact that when he was talking about the reporting that came out of why he signed is that he likes a club that has a fan base and isn't, he's not going to a City. I'm going to get loads of City supporters now coming off to me about the fact I just said they don't have a fan base. But I don't know, there's been few signings so far that Arteta has made that have gone drastically wrong. And I don't think it's going to be another Pepe situation where you're kind of asking where did all that money go. I don't think so anyways. I'm reserving judgment on how good it'll be, but also the money that's being requested seems like so much when we talk about the history of football players and what they go for, but it's also becoming kind of the norm for players of a certain standard.
Yeah, it definitely has. It just none of the signings have really set hearts alight so far in the Premier League this year. They're obviously big money signings, but it remains to be seen. David De Gea's future at Old Trafford is also
technically no longer a United player.
No, he's out of contract, and Andre Onana seems he seems open to moving from Inter Milan to Old Trafford if the interest is there, and it certainly seems like the interest is there. United making a bid for Andre Onana yesterday, so that's a bid worth €45 million, £38.5 million. Apparently Erik ten Hag is driving this move. He managed Onana at Ajax, so of course they have that relationship already. There is a gap apparently in valuation with Inter, so United have bid €45 million, as I said. Inter want around €60 million, but a compromise could well be struck. United are looking at alternatives if agreement can't be reached, but it appears David De Gea's
he's been the highest paid goalkeeper in the world for the last 4 years and hasn't performed as such, but then the years prior to that he was consistently United's best player. His legacy I think it should be remembered, but his recent form, I think there needs to be a separation. And Ten Hag's priority this summer is a number 9 and a goalkeeper, and I can see why. I don't think there are any United fans who would be sad to see De Gea leave at this point. They don't want the legacy ruined, as you said. There's also Wimbledon. Just a brief mention, Andy Murray, the redemption. This is an incredible story. The guy's a metal hip. He should be long retired, and had a brilliant first round victory, hammered Peniston, his British counterpart, and today plays Stefanos Tsitsipas, the 5th seed in the second round. And look, Wimbledon's been tough draw. The schedule's been an absolute monumental disaster so far because of the rain. Yesterday the organisers made the curious decision to keep the roof open on centre court and court 1, thinking it's going to be a shower, so they were behind again. And it was a case yesterday where Daria Kasatkina won her match to progress to the third round, and there were still 80 odd matches in the first round yet to be completed. So Tsitsipas played Dominic Thiem, the brilliant Austrian who won the US Open 3 years ago, and since then has been absolutely riddled with injuries. It went to a 5th final set tie-break, and Tsitsipas came out on top, but now Tsitsipas has to play Andy Murray today, so Murray has a serious chance of getting through. Can he beat Tsitsipas? Oh yeah, he's beaten Tsitsipas on different surfaces as well. He absolutely can, and the one really interesting fact about this is Murray's probably never been fitter since the surgery, and his form's really good recently. He played Djokovic in just a warm-up mess-around game there last weekend and easily won the first set, reports say. Now there's no footage of this, but he's the talent is there, it's a great opportunity to play Tsitsipas because he will be wrecked. Right.
Is there any chance that they'll play on the Sunday because they're so behind?
They do play Sundays now at Wimbledon. They brought that in. They brought it in, I think, was it last year, the year before? The year before I think they brought it in because 2020 there was no Wimbledon. They brought it in because they found that they were under massive pressure. I don't think they played the Sunday in 2021 because I was there that year. So last year, so it was the first year they brought it in because they found that they were way behind schedule anyway and they were up against it. So they are now, but it's simmering as a result of that. Also, Maria Sakkari, the 5th seed on the women's side, won her first set 6-love yesterday and still lost the match. Now that's heartbreaking. That rarely happens. That is insane. It is on the back page of some of the papers as well. The Mirror, Katie Boulter expects security to be stepped up after eco-protesters disrupted her Wimbledon win. So this was another Just Stop Oil campaigner or campaigners interrupting play by throwing orange confetti and jigsaw pieces on court 18. 2 other protesters had invaded the same court earlier in the day, so she's the British number 1, the only home winner. Grigor Dimitrov is the other match that they interrupted. Richie McCormick made the very valid point on the news round last night. If they really wanted to disrupt play, they should have wet the surface so that the glitter would stay. Confetti would stay. Richie. You can easily get rid of it when it's dry. Richie with his evil mind. And Boulter helped clean up the confetti too. So you like the snooker?
It wasn't as messy as the snooker, which was the Ireland.
Yeah, they could have done more. They probably will do more.
I'd say so, yeah, to be expected. At 8:03 AM on Thursday morning's OTB AM, the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. Plenty more to come between now and 10 o'clock. As we said earlier on, we have live commentary of the Republic of Ireland versus France on the show tonight. Nathan Murphy and Pearl Slattery on comms for that one. 7:45 PM kickoff at Tallaght Stadium. We'll delve into that match further with the former Irish international Meabh De Burca in studio after this quick break. First though, more from the press conference yesterday. Here's Vera Pauw's response.
I think it's the same story as in December. It is something of a few anonymous players, and how can you defend yourself against a lie? I've decided to read out one comment that I received. It is from the Netherlands. It's from Barbara Baren. She is the key person who wrote about all the abuse in gymnastics, and she sent me this yesterday. I've translated it and I've asked her if I could use it. I don't put my hands in the fire for anyone, but for you and your pedagogically responsible interaction with players, I do that 100%. I know from so many players how important you are or have been for them inside out and outside the pitch. You go beyond everything to choose the best for a person. Everyone can learn something from that. You can't defend yourself against a lie. And that's all I want to say. We are going to a World Cup. We have done phenomenally with this team, and we have never been able to do that if our bond with each other would have been so strong and so positive. And so that's all I want to say about it.
3, 2, 1, go.
Whether you're a Drive to Survive fan or a Grand Prix expert, now you can stay up to date with the world of F1. The F1 Pod on Off the Ball with Chicago Town Pizza, the ultimate podcast for F1 fans. The F1 Pod will keep you on the edge of your seat. For the best insight and analysis, subscribe to the Off the Ball daily podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. The F1 Pod on Off the Ball with Chicago Town Pizza. Formula One? Yeah, we go to town on it.
OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball.
Alright, 6 minutes past 8 on this Thursday morning's OTB AM, the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball with myself and Kathleen with you until 10 o'clock. We have loads more still to come on the show. We'll preview Galway Limerick with Barry Hennessy and Tony Regan. Jess Kelly back from Wimbledon, and around 9 o'clock Paul Howard's episode of You Had to Be There. Before that though, as I said, we have live commentary of the Republic of Ireland versus France tonight from Tallaght Stadium. Pearl Slattery will be on comms alongside Nathan Murphy for that one. Delighted to have the former Irish international Meabh De Burca in studio with us this morning. Morning, Meabh.
Morning, how are you doing?
Keeping well, thanks for popping in. I think it's your first time in studio with us.
It is indeed, yeah.
First time in.
Tuned in from South America the last time, I think.
It's right. Yeah. Jesus, yeah. Bit of a different
forgotten
vibe.
you were in South America the last time we talked to you.
Yeah.
Slightly different environment for this one.
Indeed.
Obviously, we're all excited for this game tonight. As I said, we have live commentary, but all the papers, it's hard to ignore it this morning. Out to get me. Vera Pauw says the allegations made against her are down to an agenda by one person who is, quote, trying to destroy my career. All the papers, I guess, this morning have similar enough headlines. It's timing that I guess the Irish team could have done without, but I guess they can't control the timing. This piece came out on Monday in The Athletic, and it is what it is, but certainly tense enough press conference yesterday.
Yeah, for sure. You could feel the kind of pressure I think that they were feeling with the questions being popped at them, and like you said, it's far from ideal timing, you know, on the eve of which will be a great celebration, I think, tonight in Tallaght, but it just does kind of cast a little bit of an unfortunate shadow over the whole thing.
Especially when they're putting Katie McCabe, I suppose, out. She has to, as captain, give her own view, but Katie, I thought, spoke well. She of course said, you know, I can't speak for all of the players, which is fair enough. She's the captain, but I feel like she maybe shouldn't and can't speak for every single player in that team, but I mean, it remains to be seen. We, of course, none of us know what's going on here in terms of the full truth as to what happened at Houston Dash, but it's just one of those issues that timing wise could have been better.
Exactly, and I think it was kind of tough for Katie, because when you're sitting beside the person you're asked questions about, you know, it's very difficult, and with the cameras on you and everything, what else was she going to say? You know, in fairness, we don't know, like you said, we don't know what happened, but I think it was a very difficult situation and almost an uncomfortable watch for those people watching. I just think the lack of transparency really is what the problem is, and the kind of just the lack of due diligence. Obviously some people say the allegations aren't that important or that, but at the same time you just need to, I think, make sure that the player welfare is put to the fore, and just the lack of transparency and inconsistency is, I suppose, the big issue there really within.
Yeah, and certainly to make sure the FAI investigate it properly, regardless of what the allegations are, how serious people see them to be. Were there many other questions, Kathleen, yesterday about the football? Was it like what percentage was it in terms of?
There were 3 questions and half an hour about the football, and I asked 2 of them.
Right, jeez, yeah.
Well, because I was just like, it got to the kind of the way these things work is like you have a live section and then you have stuff that's embargoed for the papers in the morning, and I was kind of getting to the end of the live section, and I was like curious as to the team that's going to play tonight. How close is it going to be to what we might see in Sydney? And like I said earlier, obviously these questions have to be asked, but I just felt like they had been asked quite a lot already at that stage, and there was no point I didn't think a different answer was going to come, and I was right, like a different answer didn't come, but I'd say in a half an hour of talking there were exactly 3 questions about the football.
Right, let's see, that's I guess where Katie McCabe's little throwaway line at the end came from. Thanks for asking about the World Cup.
Well, you could understand her frustration as well, like if you're a player and
like they've worked so hard to get here, and they have done fantastically well, so hopefully, I suppose it's one of those that it just needs to be talked about in this moment, and hopefully, like we said, it is dealt with, but perhaps the timing right now is more so that I think there will be a bit more of a focus on the football, hopefully.
Yeah, because that's the thing, I asked a couple of the players about it over the last few weeks, because obviously there's been so much in that the preliminary squad was announced, and then you had the players in the preliminary squad who were maybe on the edge, were trying to get in, but also still doing all this media and build up to the World Cup. Then the squad was announced, and there was all the hype and emotion around that, and then there's been so many events in the last week or so. They were in Farmley the other night when this article was, it was the day after the article was released, and they were getting pictures of the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach and the sports minister, so you're already dealing with all the emotion and build up with that, and then you add this on top of it as well. Like, I don't know how, when you're a player and you're dealing with like a tense situation, how easy is it to, whatever it might be, just kind of, I suppose, take yourself out of that and focus on what's happening on the pitch?
Thing. I think it would take a lot of adaptation, because they're not used to all this media attention, which is fantastic. External noise, I suppose, as Katie referenced it yesterday, but I'm sure they will be glad just to nearly get into a little bubble almost over in Australia and just focus on the football. Obviously they still have media duties and stuff, but I don't think it'll be on the same level of intensity as it has that they've experienced, like you said, even with that training camp, which they all came out, I suppose at the time they said it wasn't too bad, but then it was later emerged it was the most intense kind of 2 weeks of camp ever. So I think they'll just be happy, like I said, just to get in and just focus on the football, and I'm sure tonight in Tala that's what they'll be doing as well.
So that is kind of the way these things work. Like there's maybe a media storm over an issue like this, or allegations like this, and the players themselves, you'd like to think a lot of the players aren't reading newspapers, aren't listening to media coverage at all, especially now in advance of the World Cup. I guess they don't need that, but then of course something like this pops up, and FAI press people and media people have to basically warn the players and tell them, look, if you're asked about it, this is what you should say. That's just the way the media works. It's of course a side of it that these footballers never signed up for. They're not signed up to be PR people or to answer questions necessarily at all. They're there to play football, but it's just a side of the game that they have to be prepared for, especially in advance of World Cup. As you say, this is because this Irish team are getting so much coverage rightly now because they've qualified for a first World Cup, and this is the byproduct of it, the byside of it, I guess, that they have to deal with.
They are also all incredibly well spoken, because they've had to spend so much time putting themselves forward and advocating for themselves and saying, look at us, give us the coverage, talk about our football. Like, as well as they play on the pitch, they're also all quite good speakers, but I suppose this is sort of the situation you never expect to have to answer questions about. And
they're probably thinking, even because obviously this is 2 weeks before the first World Cup game, and we're talking about the likes of this, but even after the Scotland game, the greatest night of their lives, then of course there's the song in the dressing room and all the madness that came out of that. So they must be thinking, we can't enjoy anything. So they're used to off pitch matters being the topic of discussion now, I guess. It's probably good practice for them in some ways, because these things do crop up.
Yeah, and if anything was, to happen within the World Cup situation as well, I suppose they're definitely going to be the most equipped team nearly to deal with it. But you can see they're not the only ones. A lot of the teams going into the World Cup now have little kind of shadows, I suppose, hanging over them for various different reasons. And but like I said, that's the nature now of the women's game. This wasn't the case, 8 years ago, like maybe 4 years ago, there were a little bit more, but now that just comes with the increased media coverage, and it's part and parcel of it, really, I suppose, for them.
Of course, the game itself then tonight, Meabh, and obviously in one way you think, maybe nice handy 4-0 friendly win over some smaller nation might be perfect heading into a World Cup. As it is, it's the 5th best team in the world according to the rankings, France. But this has kind of been consistent with Vera Pauw over the last couple of years. She's always aimed for bigger opposition, I guess.
Yeah, she has, in fairness, and I think it'll be a really, really good test for them tonight, because it's going to be better than the calibre of the opposition they're going to face in the group games, at least. We're hoping in advance that it won't be just 3 games they're playing. So I think France are a really strong, powerful, like physical team. They're great attack and defend and everything. They're really, I think, nearly a complete team, and now they're, Reynard is after coming in, so it'll be interesting to see, a manager coming in 4 months before a tournament starts, what he can implement. But I think by all accounts, like, he's a proven winner, so I think it should be an interesting one.
They're quick on the flanks, France, as well, by all accounts. Like, have a lot of pace. Like, are they similar in any way to teams we might face in the group, like Canada, Australia? I guess coming up against some of those French forwards might prepare you a little bit for Sam Kerr, but there are maybe similarities that Pauw has. I guess there's reasons why Vera Pauw has picked France in particular.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, even there, when you talk about the pace, I nearly get flashbacks of the last time we played them, and they're just running over the top all the time, chasing, turning their backs and chasing. So, but I think Ireland will sit in so that that maybe that kind of strength of France, they won't be able to exploit it as much. But for sure, they're really powerful. They're really fast and quick, and they've last summer, like France's top leading goal scorer up front. She's recently come back into the squad. I would have played against her multiple times under 19 and senior level, and Henri as well. Amandine and Henri is back as well. So I think they're really, like, their attacking force is something to be.
What do they like to play against?
They were I would say if I was watching it would have been a nice game to watch, but when you're in the mix, and if the third goal goes in and then the fourth goal, then it's always a bit of a daunting task. But definitely I think they're one of the teams I think I would pick nearly as favourites for the tournament, even though they're not ranked as favourites or that. But I think if things click for them, I think they could be really, really good, and it's just going to be interesting to see now how tonight pans out as well.
In terms of the Irish squad, like, what are you expecting from who Vera's going to pick and put in?
Yeah, I think, well, she said herself, I suppose it's going to be as close to the team that starts next or in Sydney that she can. So I think, I don't think, well, there's always one surprise or two, isn't there? I was going to say I don't expect many surprises, but I'd be lying. So we predict a team, and there'll probably be at least one that we're not quite expecting. But I think she's going to go for experience, and I think we will see the Sinead and Marissa as well come in.
Full home debuts for them.
I think so. Anyways, that's what I suppose.
Sinead only has one cap as well. She kind of needs another one.
It's crazy, really, that
World Cup,
the players have never played in a football match in Ireland, and now they're going to represent Ireland, in a World Cup. But
especially with Sinead, she's probably close enough to the starting team as well. Yeah, more so than Marissa. Yeah, could be in there. Like, I wouldn't be all that surprised, but Sinead definitely, with how we lined up against the US.
Yeah, I think so, and I think she kind of is, by all accounts, a really good player. So I think we'll see her in from the start tonight.
Is Vera Pauw almost gonna? Would you expect her to almost set aside the opposition tonight? Like, is she setting up tonight for Australia, or is she setting up tonight for France?
I think she'll be setting up for Australia, or with them in mind at least. I don't think she'll kind of zone in necessarily on the individual players of France. Obviously they will still talk about it in meetings and their strengths and weaknesses and all that, but I think the general structure and whether they were to, like, if they're to implement some form of, I don't know, man marking job, I don't think that's done really nowadays, but if someone has to take more of the, I suppose, the attention of Sam Kerr, maybe they'll do the same with the French striker this morning or this evening who could be Lissamere. So I think they'll still have Australia completely, I think, in their mind. Yeah.
What So I guess Vera Pauw's already said she's going to play her strongest team that she possibly can for tonight's game. What team would you like to see?
Oh, what I'd like to see versus what?
Well, yeah, does it differ massively, your team versus?
Well, I'd have players starting who aren't in the squad, but that's we don't have that option. I can only pick from the 23 that are there now.
Not in the squad. Who's not in the squad that you would have had in your 11?
Roma McLaughlin, Jamie Finn, to name but two. Right. Yeah, I don't know. I could probably go on, but that's two that spring to mind anyway.
Roma's an interesting one because she wasn't even in the preliminary.
Yeah, I think
squad.
she's quality. Like even when she played in America as well with her college team, I actually saw her play live over there a couple of times, and she's really like such a technical player, I think, as well. I don't know, she was overlooked slightly, but again, it could, there could be reasons for that too. We can't see from the outside how she performed within the camp as well, but that's fine for us to say. But yeah, maybe they see different qualities in her as well in that. But I suppose at the back, I'd see definitely Louise and Niamh as two of the back three, and I'd probably think that Megan Connolly will probably be switched back there as well, and then I'd imagine Heather and Katie to make up the back five, and then I think probably, well, obviously Denise will be a definite starter, and I think she'd put Lily Agg in there beside her. Toss up between Rusha, I think, and Lily Agg, but I think maybe she might go. I'm not sure really, because Lily Agg was actually left out of the squad against Zambia, but obviously I suppose with the reason that she was definitely going to be in, I suppose. And
Rusha is kind of a weird one because obviously she suffered so much with injuries over the last couple of months.
That's the thing. I don't know how does she have 90 minutes in her? I'm not sure.
And would you rather put her on for the last 20 or something, or put her on, take her off kind of early if she's struggling?
I suppose that's what they'll see. Maybe they will start her and see how she gets on, and see what's kind of in the tank. But then, I think she'll start Sinead, and I actually think she may start Marissa as well. Even though again we haven't seen much of her, but I would probably have Abby Larkin maybe in there, or one of the kind of more the other attacking players, and then I think up front she'll go for Ciara Carusa. I think I suppose just given how she has the history on who she has played, I suppose is how. But it's kind of interesting because 6 of them actually of that starting team weren't even in the squad for Zambia, so it'll be a completely different change team.
How close is Amber Barrett to a start?
I think that's a really, really interesting one, because it's kind of like, actually I think England are facing a similar situation with Russo and Daly. Russo, or Amber in our case, is so great off the bench that and she's made such an impact, and it must be very frustrating, I'd imagine, for her not to be getting a start, because she's done everything. What more can she do? Come on and score, so I think I'd also like to see her given a chance from the start, and even tonight, even if it's not fully in her head to do it, I think it would be great to see her given the chance, and just to prove what she can do from the start. And like I said, we still have plenty of firepower from the bench as well, so that's definitely going to be one of the more interesting positions to see who she goes there.
Slightly off piece from the Ireland game, but you mentioned the Russo Daly question, and I'm so curious as to what Wiegman's going to go for, because if you look at the season, Daly is the better player, but also all the Euros she played in defence, and Russo was the player that everyone was calling out for to come off the bench, being why are we starting Ellen White, start Russo. And then Ellen White retired, and now all the English fans are oh no, bring back Ellen White, she was really good, she scored us goals.
It is an interesting one, but Russo's just impact off the bench is hard to ignore too, and when players' legs are tired and stuff like that as well, she does seem to have the more of an impact. But to go, it's just such credit to Daly to go from a starter, as generally versatile players may not always be on the starting team. It's really rare. I can't remember a time where someone has started in one tournament, played every game in defence, and then is in line to start just the next year in another tournament in a completely different position, having scored like you said 22 goals in 22 games in England, and not even for a top team. That's the one, I suppose. If she was like Sam Kerr compare that in one of the top teams, it's obviously easier to get more ball, and the scoring rate wouldn't be as, I suppose, impressive. But for her, she's done so well. I think Daly will start. I don't know. I think that's how she's going to go. And
I did just love all the US fans this season whenever WSL fans are like, wow, Rachel Daly is a really good forward, and they're like, guys, you've been sitting on a secret for a couple of years now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she'd go club, obviously. For club she's played forward for a long time. Then I suppose it's similar to Anya as well. In our case, we've Anya playing as a defender now with the national team, and striker, for Rovers. So but it's just been adaptable, I suppose, and the players at that level can do that.
Bit farcical from Manchester United's perspective that Alessia Russo was allowed ultimately to leave on a free transfer.
Yeah.
But look, she's brilliant. Is it the third summer signing for Arsenal? She's only 24. She's had a few good seasons at United as well. Like, how good a signing is that for Arsenal? Will that take them to the next level, do you think?
I think so. Like, when you look at the kind of, they're just stacked now with talent across the front line. They've so many options. Blackstenius, I'm not sure where she fits in now nearly with the options they have. But yeah, as a Man United fan, it wasn't great business, I think, to see Russo go on a free. It was I think an opportunity lost. And for her, I think it's a good move. I think she'll learn a lot there as well, I think. And I suppose it shows, as a United fan, her leaving, it must have taken a lot, for her to leave, and it might say something about how the club has been run there, that she found Arsenal a more attractive offer.
Well, I think if you look at the reporting around it, basically United wanted to keep her, but also didn't offer her great terms on the deal, and then at the very last minute came back into the situation, and we're like,
matched her wages at the end.
And she was just like frustrated with how the club had operated up until that point. And as you say, as someone who's grown up as a United fan, it takes a bit for you to leave, and for your club to treat you like that, it's probably almost worse if you're a fan. And
I think so, because kind of the emotion side of it wouldn't come into it that much, anymore. But I'd say it just shows, it shows the appeal of Arsenal as well. I would imagine how they've such a history in the women's game too. Man United are really only a new force as well. So I think all eyes would be on Arsenal, I think, as a team to beat next season there for sure.
I hope so.
Fan in the corner here.
Well, I think we would have won the WSL this year if everyone had stayed fit.
Their history record was
very
just crazy.
ACLs left, right and centre.
Just popping like
constantly. Ahead of the Irish World Cup bid, I guess Meabh will call it. Like, where on the team is your biggest concern? Like, do you have any gaping concerns in the squad or the team at the moment?
Nothing like
be negative, but we should be realistic here as well, I guess.
I think they've performed so well, and they probably know themselves where their weaknesses lie, and how they can counteract them in that. But I thought against Zambia, because we pushed on and we tried to attack a lot more than we would against higher ranked teams, that maybe our lack of pace at the back was slightly exposed, particularly for the last goal, I think. But I don't think that will be a case, because I would imagine us sitting in a low block against probably all the teams, slightly less so against Nigeria maybe, particularly if we have to get something out of that game. I think we'll go a little bit more kind of more attacking slightly, but we usually do sit in and try to get set pieces, and that's how we're the best, I think, as well. And any kind of, I suppose, risks we take going forward, they're calculated risks, so it's kind of, they know we always usually have plenty of cover and that, so it would mainly, I think, just on a counter attack from a set piece is where it would be possibly we might be vulnerable, but I think come by the time our first game rolls around, I think they'll have that all kind of under control. Hopefully
we will be, you'd imagine, tonight sitting back and defending for a vast majority of those 90 minutes. That's just realistic. I know we had that unbelievable record of not conceding a goal for I can't remember how long it was, but it was an incredible run of games. And then obviously the couple of games in America, and then the Zambia game. The Zambia game you can probably discount. A lot of changes to the team, probably nerves pre-squad announcement as well, that sort of thing. But if they can just re-find that that era where they weren't conceding goals whatsoever. That'd be kind of nice. No, don't concede.
Definitely be kind of nice.
3-0 be enough to get us through the group? I don't know.
I know, I was doing those permutations. Didn't I think Portugal in the men's side, I think maybe have qualified without winning a game. Yeah, so I mean, if we don't concede, we'll probably, you're right, if we don't concede, we'll probably qualify to the next round. So yeah, it's not too bad, I suppose, a permutation. But yeah, I think that's it. That's the most important thing, is just to be really, really hard to break down and not to give up any easy goals. You know, make whatever team, if they are to score, to work hard for it. And like you said, it probably wouldn't be a team renowned for scoring a lot of goals. So I think obviously we need to limit the amount of chances and the goals we give up, and then hopefully, like I said, even, you know, a counter attack like that night in Hamden or that, you know, I think we are well capable of counter attacking, but I think it needs to be done at speed is the main thing, really, because it's hard though when you're defending for such long periods in a game to then want to just go when you get the ball. The kind of usual reaction is to just relax and take a breather for a minute, but in our case I think we need to, once we win it, then try to see if the early ball is on. Obviously if it's not, then we can try to control it a little bit, but
it's kind of the frustrating thing with not having Mannion in the squad, because she probably gave us the option of playing out from the back a little bit more and doing so with like pace, whereas we don't really have that option unless it's like Katie and Heather coming up the wings, but even still you probably don't want them pulled out of position too much. Maybe
a little more if Megan Connolly is back there, you know. I suppose given her that she's played in midfield as well, maybe there might be a bit more kind of that to be seen. But you're right, Aoife definitely showed that when she was in, and I think you could see a kind of a few long balls going astray, particularly earlier on in the Sandy game. They just kind of seem to not have many ideas, but I think again, like, that'll all be dissected into pieces. Well,
it just reminded me of how we were playing like maybe 6 or 7 months ago, when we still were so dependent on just hoofing the ball up to Heather when she was playing up front. And
how difficult was.
How often did we, like, after games say, God, she's great at running, because all she did was like run and run and run for games, and like to chase balls down or like chase players down. But in terms of the actual options to scoring, very rarely was there actually one properly on.
That's the thing. And I was recently talking, obviously Heather played with Salthill Devon, where I grew up playing as well, and I was talking to someone in the club recently, and we just said how frustrating it was for us to watch her up front, given that we'd seen her has been so incredible on the wing all throughout her career, her club career with Salthill and that. So
she seems quite happy. Like, I was chatting to her last week about it, and I was like, you know, how are you finding the switch for the national team? And she is like, it's way more comfortable.
Yeah, you can just see, like, she's just so comfortable there. She obviously, she's a workhorse anyway, and she did as good a job as possible up front, but she was just chasing down aimless balls a lot. But now you can just see her, she's really kind of coming into her own. You can see her kind of, she almost glides with the ball, like, at her feet. It's, you know, it doesn't really even, sometimes the way she runs, you wouldn't even know she has the ball with her, because it's that kind of effortless, I suppose. But yeah, it's great to see her there finally. And I mean, I think Carusa or Amber Barrett is a great option up front as well. So I don't think, you know, I think it'll only benefit the team.
Carusa's quite an underrated player, I think, because she hasn't played in leagues that people watch all that often.
Yeah, that's true.
People are almost like slightly surprised, even though she had quite a good goal scoring record at her club. And you know, again, like you were saying about Heather, it has always puzzled me who we've played up front when we do actually have players that naturally play in that position, whether it's like Carusa or even the likes of Leanne Kiernan. I know she's not in this squad, but she's always been there. Amber Barrett. There are quite a few options that we could have had.
That's the thing, and Carusa, I suppose, gives the option of kind of a hold-up player as well. So it does really, I suppose, depend on how we're going to play. And I suppose, unfortunately, maybe from Amber's point of view, is that we're going to be playing like tougher teams, where we're not going to maybe have as many chances to run over the top. We're just going to try to look for that out ball and try to relieve the pressure a bit more. But yeah, I still, going back to what we were saying earlier, I would love to see Amber given a chance from the start tonight. But you know, I suppose it remains to be seen whether we'll see that or not.
Some of the players that we haven't even mentioned in the 23 person squad, like that, I mean, Vera doesn't exactly go beyond many of the players in terms of subs? Like you're probably thinking 16, 17 of that 23 will ultimately play.
Maximum, I'd say. Yeah, because even if you look at a record in competitive games, it's generally 1 or 2 subs. Like in friendlies a little bit more, but in the last few games it's usually up to 2 would be probably. Now you might see more in a tournament situation, but I still don't think so, because even I think the first game before their second game against Canada, they have an extra day's rest in Canada as well. So I think
it's because the team is travelling so much. They have an extra
exactly that 5-hour trek. It's not like it's not going all the way to Dublin now. In fairness, Sydney to Perth is a little bit longer. So I think like I said, there's so many players who won't see the field over there.
At the list, like even in the defenders, Izzy Atkinson, Claire O'Riordan, possibly even midfielders Ciara Grant, Lucy Quinn. Like these players, of course, could well play and could have some involvement in the World Cup, but they're probably borderline as to even make an appearance.
And that's why I think it was interesting, even given that Aoife Mannion, say for example, was left out. Like we're saying there, the reality is 5 or 6 players won't play over there, so you kind of nearly can take a risk. Could have taken a risk almost on those players, but same. I mean, when England won the Euros last year, you didn't see much variation from their starting team and the subs who came on either. So I think once the team is set, even I think tonight is going to be really, really interesting, because I think that it's going to be those 11 players that play tonight will definitely feature, in the World. Well, hopefully will definitely feature in the World Cup. But I can't see any more than like 14, 15.
Right.
It's funny how stressed we were over the 23 and who was going to get picked.
That's what
Well, it was like the day before the squad was announced, and I felt so like tense and nervous. And then I was talking to someone down there, like, Kathleen, realistically, you're not actually going to see half of these players anyways.
Yeah, and that's why even I was talking to someone about it when we were predicting our teams over and back, and I had actually said I don't see Jamie Finban in the squad, and she was like, no, she's going to start, and I was like, no, I think she should start, but I was saying that I think it would have been great to see some of the younger players. I think the likes of Erin McLaughlin and Tara to be maybe have been just thrown in the mix there, and like we said there, the chances are they probably wouldn't have got to the pitch, but can you imagine the experience they'd have trying to qualify then, and bring that with them throughout the...
I thought it was interesting Vera saying that Tara probably would have been in the squad if Izzy Atkinson hadn't have played so well.
That's true,
and that's how tight the margins are,
and it's very unfortunate. I think she had her PE Leaving Cert exam the next day as well, so she was she did well to juggle all that, and I know she definitely has a bright future ahead, but it would have been such a great experience for them to have experienced a tournament situation, and but anyway, it's the squad she chose at the end of the day, I suppose.
Before we let you go, Meabh, score prediction, how do you see tonight going?
Oh, it's a tricky one. Head or heart is always the question here. Yeah, exactly. I think a 0-0 would be great. I think I'm going to go for a draw. Yes, it probably is a little bit more the head here, or the heart, but I'll go for a 1-1 draw. Let's see how that works out.
We'll take it.
Definitely take that.
Remember Barrett goal off the bench again. Great stuff, Meabh. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks a lot.
As usual, great to have you in the studio. Meabh De Burca there, the former Irish international. I should mention at 8:35 a.m. on this Thursday morning's OTB AM, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball. Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of OTB. Braeburn Coffee is coming to an Applegreen near you. New Braeburn locations are popping up every month, so visit applegreenstores.com/Braeburn to find your nearest Braeburn coffee experience. Up next, we'll have Barry Hennessy and Tonio Regan to preview Galway versus Limerick in the All-Ireland Senior Hurling semi-final this Saturday. First though, the final clip from yesterday's press conference. More here from Vera Pauw.
So you feel that if you were a male coach, the reaction to this wouldn't have been the same?
I'll go through the allegations and just put Pep Guardiola or Louis van Gaal or Mourinho in that. Then you would actually laugh about it, because it's all about coaching. It's all about coaching. It's not about anything else. So I don't want to go into the details, because it is nonsense, it's untrue. And as I said before, there's great safety in the truth. And that truth is with me, and the people around me, the people who know me, the people who saw me working know that it's not true. There's not one single person who knows me for a long time has put any question mark behind it. So that's my safety, and that's what I'm carrying with me. I need to have my full energy for these players. and many players came to support and to ask what a crack or what a nonsense it was, because they know me so differently, as well as from all the other teams that I've been coaching. So I want to leave it with that. I will never win from a lie. That is clear now. Whatever you do, you don't win from a lie, and I have to live with it and carry it with me the rest of my life, I'm afraid.
Yeah, 8:37 AM on this Thursday morning's OTB AM, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball with myself and Kathleen, live with you until 10 o'clock. That was the last clip we had from Vera Pauw speaking at yesterday's press conference. Loads more clips. Kathleen was of course there for us. You'll get them up on the youtube.com/Off the Ball, where you can subscribe as well to our YouTube channel. We're going to turn our attention now to matters hurling. Of course, the small matter of the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship semi-final between Galway and Limerick this coming Saturday at Croke Park. Kilkenny and Clare then on Sunday afternoon. Delighted to welcome to the show this morning the former Limerick hurler Barry Hennessy and the former Galway hurler Tony O'Regan. Barry and Tony, morning, how are things?
Morning everyone, how are we getting on?
Keeping well, lads, keeping well. Thanks for joining us. Tony, we might start with yourself. This is a small task, playing Limerick in an All-Ireland semi-final. It should be a bit of a cracker. It's been a funny season for Galway. 10 points down to Dublin at half time, losing to Kilkenny by a goal then as well, but it's been patchy, a lot of wides in some of those games. But how do you feel about the season so far? I guess it's coming together now, in last four anything can happen.
Yeah, I think those inconsistencies in game have probably really confused, I suppose, players, management and supporters. And I think the last day, in fairness, against Tip, there was probably a more consistent performance through the 70-75 minutes. So I think Galway supporters will be hoping that we can, bring that intensity and bring that level of application for a full 70 minutes, and then you're really putting Limerick under pressure this weekend.
Barry, from your perspective, from the Limerick perspective, I guess in recent seasons it's been sheer dominance. This year Limerick haven't beaten a team in the championship by more than 2 points. Is it fair to say that the rest of the chasing pack have caught up to or are catching up to Limerick at this point?
Yeah, Shane, I think that the chasing pack, as we call them, I don't think they got the credit they deserve this year, to be honest. They've obviously raised their own standards internally across the teams, and I think a lot was spoken about how Limerick have maybe fallen back a little bit instead of how the chasing pack has caught up with them. And to be fair, if you look at all the games this year, like the level of intensity that other teams brought, like it's the first time in a long time I've seen Limerick players being chased, with manic aggression and being hit every chance that a team got to hit them, and stop the build-up play. So I think great credit goes to those teams. They've obviously raised their standards, and it's made a great championship so far. So.
Tony, come back to yourself. We'll get Barry's line back up in a second. Just a little bit difficult to hear him there. From Galway perspective, do you expect changes to the team much? Dahi Burke staying at 6, or will he be moved around, do you think?
No, I think it'd be really important that Galway kind of can stay consistent with their defensive system now that, I think the team are comfortable with Garrod at 3 and Dahi at 6, and, I think the more they can keep those players in those central positions, the more kind of structure and organisation we have as a team, and it just brings that kind of confidence and solidity around the back line. So, when I see Galway, maybe Dahi's gone to wing back and Garrod is out on the sideline, I get kind of worried, because I kind of tend to think that we're very open down the middle, as you were seeing in the Leinster final. So the more time the boys spend in those central positions, I think the more solidness we'll see in our defensive structure, and I think that'll be vital in terms of Saturday evening if they're to hold this Limerick attack at bay.
It's been a question that we've asked practically every person, whether they're a pundit or a player or a manager on the show. But for you, what is the key things that Galway can do to actually beat Limerick in this game?
Yeah, I think if you look at last year's semi-final, I think Galway started extremely well and just probably didn't execute 5 or 6 scoring chances in that first quarter that could have put a gap of 5 or 6 points on Limerick. And then coming down the stretch, I think Galway brought their subs on off the bench, and I think the thinking at the time was maybe some of these subs hadn't got enough game time during the season, and that match sharpness, like take for example Evan Nyland come on, had 2 or 3 shots at goal. Like normally Evan is 9 out of 10 times he'll hit the target and score, but when he came on last year, probably hadn't enough match time last year and wasn't as accurate when he came on. So you can absolutely see throughout the league and the Leinster Championship this year, that they, really spread that load in terms of game time and changing up the team and bringing on subs early. And I think, if Galway can get to that last quarter within a score, Limerick, they know they have a bench that can impact like they did against Tip the last day. Now, there's a couple of things have changed this week in terms of Jason Flynn getting a hamstring injury. Like, Jason has had a huge impact against Dublin and Kilkenny when he's come in against Tip again the last day. So that's one out of the equation for Galway, that you can spring that last quarter. Do we start Tom Monaghan? I suppose is another question now for management to bring forth, that Tom has been exceptional for Galway the last 2 seasons and probably creating 4 or 5 scores from midfield or half forward, as well as hitting his own 3 or 4 points per game as well. So that's another dilemma for management. Do they start Tom, or do they wait for his energy to come into it in the second half, when maybe Limerick's half backline midfield area might have more space in it? So they're kind of little dilemmas management will have to come up with in terms of who are the 2 or 3 impact players that will add scores and add creation in that middle third and that final third for Galway in that last quarter. And I think that it will be the difference, because when you look at Limerick's bench last year, David Reedy come on, Peter Casey, this year will Keane Lynch be starting? So they probably have a few more cards in terms of fit players at the moment and experienced players to bring into that last quarter that could tip the scales again this season.
Barry, Declan Hannon's absence, how significant is that for Limerick?
I suppose in the grand scheme of things, Shane, it's massive. Declan's hurling IQ and his awareness is massive. And just his ability to read a game and provide that cover that's needed for the guy beside him or the line behind him, so like he really is that on-field leader in general. But look, I suppose throughout the last couple of years there's always been a significant injury in the camp, and the mantra has always been next man up. So it'll be interesting to see how the squad respond to that at the weekend, and see who takes the opportunity with both hands and runs with it.
And who is that next man up? Like, do you expect Kyle Hayes to move to 6? Someone like Colin Coughlin, I guess, can move to 7. Michael Dignan, interestingly, this week, and I was speaking to Tommy Welch about this yesterday in studio, Dignan suggesting that maybe Keane Lynch could be a rabbit out of the hat and move to number 6. Who would you expect to be the person to take up that role?
I'd like to think it was Nicky Quaid, Shane, and that John was calling me back in there in the morning to come back into the squad, but because we were waiting long enough for it. But no, I think personally I'd love to see Barry Nash there because of the skill set he brings, and he's an out-and-out ball player. But I could see Dan Morrissey just slotting in there. I think Paul Murphy described him yesterday as Mr. Dependable, and he is that guy. Like, it's rare that Dan is in the limelight for making a mistake. He does the basics, the bread and butter well. And it's probably an easier switch for John and the management team just to push one lad out and bring in maybe the likes of Richie English into the corner rather than moving 2 or 3 lads around the place. So,
are there any concerns? Didn't they move Dan Morrissey from 3 to 6 against Cork, was it? And they kind of almost immediately moved him back. It didn't seem to work. Is there any concerns there? I guess, as you say, though, generally speaking, Dan Morrissey is Mr. Dependable.
Yeah, like, I suppose they've had 4 weeks as well, Shane, to try this and training too. So I suppose Dan hadn't played at 6 in a while, so like the last 4 weeks you think would have stood to do whatever they're going to try there. There's going to be a lot of in-house games there and scenarios put at whoever that person's going to be, and I think that they'll be prepared for that, and they'll know that the lads in front of them have to provide that cover as well to allow Dan to provide the cover behind them as well. So I'm sure they've worked on to at this stage.
Tony Conor Whelan, I guess, has been the talk of one of the players that's been the talk of the championship thus far. 2-10 in his last 2 games. Is there a responsibility now that the rest of the Galway forwards to kind of step up and almost help him in some regards, not just in terms of scoring but in performance generally? Like Brian Concannon held scoreless against Tip, taken off on 54 minutes. So with a little bit of help, these Conor Whelan performances could really be emphasised, I guess.
Yeah, I think we're going to need probably a 7 or 8 out of 10 performance from most of the forward line this weekend in terms of contribution, work rate wise, but also scoring wise, and a bigger spread of scores, I suppose, back from the half back line up to midfield would be a great help around that. Conor has definitely brought his game to a new level this season in terms of consistency game to game, and he needs to bring a really big one again on Saturday evening. But I would be happy with overall in terms of the work rate of the forward line and how they're playing for each other and laying the ball off. And sometimes Conor's on the end of those scores, sometimes Tom Monaghan, sometimes Brian Concannon, sometimes Evan Ireland, and you'd be hoping a couple other names pop up in terms of those 9 out of 10 performances this weekend, because you're probably going to need that to overcome a Limerick challenge that's just unbelievable at the moment.
Tony, I know you're working as a sports psychologist. We've spoken to you before about that on the show as well, but am I right in saying you were a sports psychologist within the Limerick squad back in 2019?
Yeah, that'd be true, Shane. A very enjoyable season, and unfortunately we were pipped in the semi-final by Kilkenny, so didn't get a chance to experience an All-Ireland with them.
But the mentality of the Limerick team, and you'll have seen it up close and personal, it's something else, isn't it? Like they just seem, clearly they're physically in their prime and in a very good place, but mentally as well, they seem able to deal with setbacks. And let's be honest, they haven't had a few, but even being that front runner, it's not an easy position to be in constantly. We saw it with the Dublin 6 in a row team. They showed mentality on another scale as well, but Limerick have certainly been one of those teams that have shown that as well.
Yeah, like, you just have to have huge admiration. It's grand seeing the lads playing on a Sunday and they're bringing that level of hunger and skill that they have, but to do the things that you have to do day in, day out to be at the top of your game, like, everyone is analysing to the death in terms of how they play, but for players themselves to stay self-motivated in terms of lifestyle, in terms of gym programs, in terms of mobility, in terms of their skill sessions, and their whole mindset and approach towards every training session, every league campaign, every championship match, they've just shown a ferocious ambition and a ferocious hunger and a ferocious dedication. And till a team kind of matches that, you're not going to be in the same ballpark as them. And no one has matched that the last 5 or 6 years really. And you'd have to admire them in terms of their dedication to it and how much they put into it, because to be in that top 5% for as long as they have, it takes unbelievable dedication, unbelievable mindset, and in fairness to them, they've shown that consistently.
Barry, there's so much made about distribution, goalkeeper distribution, certainly in Gaelic football this year especially, and kick out retention being such a massive part of it. From Limerick's perspective, and you'll have seen this again up close and personal, but how important is that distribution and winning that battle to retain the ball? Nicky Quaid is obviously someone who's fairly adept at it, but I'm sure it's something that is widely spoken about in training these days.
Yeah, I suppose you've got a guy there, Shane, that's going to have the ball in his hand maybe 40-50 times in a game, and the days of just hitting it long, I suppose, and hoping for the best, they're gone, so at the weekend it's going to be interesting to see how, I suppose, Galway responded. Do they push up, do they sit back, allow the first phase ball out, and then allow the second phase after that where the runner comes back through the middle for it? Because you can see where teams have got joy against Limerick this year. They've kind of allowed first phase where the ball goes out to Barry Nash and have shut out the second phase ball and have forced it to go long, and I suppose they put Limerick under pressure that way. So you can see the last day against Clare in the Munster final that Limerick went long a lot. It was probably the first time in a while I've seen where they've hit a long puck out past the other 65 consistently without breaking it up to going short. So it'll just be interesting to see what way that the Galway will up and respond to that. But it's coming back to your original question, yeah, look, it's something that's worked on religiously, because as I said, it's a massive platform, and it has been a massive platform for Limerick over the years, and in fairness to Nicky, he's nearly the Stephen Cluxton of the hurling game. He's revolutionised the restart. So
I was asking Tommy Welsh in studio yesterday about the break that Limerick have had versus Galway and whether it's helped them or not, because I guess sometimes you can have too long a break, sometimes you obviously need the time to refresh the legs as well. But Tommy referenced the fact that Limerick would have been playing these A versus B quote unquote matches in training, which when you have the squad depth and strength in depth that Limerick have, I'd imagine are fairly competitive. You'll have had some experience of those games in training, Barry. I guess people always look at the break that the team have had, but those games are fairly vicious, I'd say, behind the scenes.
Yeah, I suppose you've 37 competitive lads there, Shane, that are going toe to toe 2-3 weeks, even the week before a game, and obviously everyone wants to put their hand up and make an impression and try and give what they can to the group. And if it wasn't more than once it happened where the B team actually beat the A team on occasion, so that just shows you how competitive things were. But look, that 4-week break, I think Limerick have navigated very well over the last few years. In 2019, there was a lot of lessons in that maybe we did a little bit too much on that break, and came in a little bit flat against Kilkenny. Whereas in the last couple of years, they've navigated really well. They know the routine of it now. What has worked in the past, it's given a chance for a couple of lads to just refresh after probably an attritional Munster Championship again, where every game in the Munster Championship was nearly an All-Ireland final for every team, because the scalp everyone wants at the moment is the Limerick scalp, so every team they really raised their game for their Limerick game, and it was extremely attritional and very taxing on the body. So John will be glad of the break there to give lads give them a week off at the start and then to knuckle down to 3 weeks of decent training. So
Tony, Aaron Gillan is no doubt one of the players that Henry Shefflin would have pinpointed for a little bit of special treatment and looking after on Saturday evening in Croke Park. How would you expect Galway to deal with him? Because he's been such a problem for every team that Limerick have come up against. 1-4 inside the last day, I think it was. Cal Mannion, of course, playing the sweeper role. You maybe have Dahi Burke mentioned. I think Tommy mentioned him as yesterday. Someone who could pick up Gillan. How do you look after him?
Yeah, there's probably 2 or 3 modes you have to kind of think on. It's probably, first of all, can you get pressure on the delivery outside and not allow Limerick to get their heads up in terms of the half backline midfield area? Obviously Cahill played as a kind of sweeper role the last day as well, so I would say he'd be probably leaning towards his position more towards Gillan, even though Gillan plays central a lot and then probably moves out to different corners, so it can be quite difficult to manage that. And obviously then the man marking role inside, who's going to pick him up on that matchup, and probably looking at Garrod, I suppose, to start with and see how it goes from there. But it'll need to be a kind of a team approach in terms of closing down the space in defence and making sure those deliveries aren't as pinpoint as usual, and hope from there then you can kind of defend it a bit better, because with some of the deliveries he got in the Munster final in 30-40 yards of space hopping in front of him, he can go left or right, he can take you on, he can win it overhead. He's a real handful and his movement is just top class, so Galway are probably going to need those different modes to try and shut down that space around him.
Before we let you go, lads, we have to get the predictions. Is it hard over head? Is it head over hard? We'll see now in a second. But last year's semi-final, I'm just looking at the final score last year. Limerick 27 points, Galway 121. So 4 points in it, or 3 points in it rather, in last year's semi-final. Tony, how do you see Saturday going?
Yeah, I think with the Tipperary match 2 weeks ago, and a lot of Galway lads shown really good form, I think that match sharpness just might be enough to bring them forth and put them into a winning position by maybe a score or two going down the stretch. So we'll be quite hopeful and optimistic that it could be the time that they turn over Limerick in the semi-final. Very good. And Barry, how do you see it playing out?
I think the beauty of the group being together for so long, Shane, is they've been in this situation before where they know to win big games, and I do think it'll be a lot closer than it was last year. I do think it'll probably be a 1-score game as well, and I'm saying Limerick.
I'm so excited for it, because I think last night the show James O'Connor and the lads were echoing those sentiments, saying that they'll be expecting a score in it at the end. Just before, in a word, lads, Kilkenny-Clare, Tony, who are you going for in that one?
Yeah, I'd be surprised at the level of favouritism seems to be around Clare. Like, Kilkenny are just unbelievable at semi-final stage and have a great record. So I think Clare will have to be a lot sharper than they were against Dublin, and will have to come with that energy and work rate that they had in the Munster campaign. If they don't, Kilkenny will blow you away. So at the moment I think Kilkenny are probably favourites, and Clare really have to kind of step up and show that they've improved from last year.
Barry, in a word, Kilkenny or Clare?
Yeah, it's Clare for me, Shane. We've a club man involved with them, so I'll give them the vote on this one.
Give them the nod. Good stuff, lads. Thanks many for hopping on this morning. Great stuff.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks, guys.
Nice one, lads. Barry Hennessy, Antonio Regan there, previewing Galway Limerick on Saturday at Croke Park. Really looking forward to that, and that idea that it's going to be a 1-score game certainly seems to be the idea most people are coming up with. I should mention as well at 8:55 AM on Thursday mornings, OTB AM, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball. The football pod are hitting the road again, and yesterday tickets were released for their road show on All Ireland Football Final Week. It's going to be in Croke Park on Thursday the 27th of July, with thanks to AIB. Tommy Rooney, Paddy Andrews, James O'Donoghue, all bringing the football pod live to the Hogan Suite in Croke Park for a live show where they'll also be joined by some very special guests. This is your warning. Tickets are limited, and they very nearly sold out last night. You can get the remaining few now over at offtheball.com/events. It's the only place to be before this year's All Ireland Football Final. Back in a sec. Jess Kelly back from Wimbledon.
we've got big news, boys. The pod, the football pod, have another roadshow coming. Woo! Thursday, the 27th of July.
All-Ireland final week, is it?
Yes. All-Ireland final week, 3 days before the All-Ireland final.
Go on.
The football pod are bringing a roadshow, a live roadshow, an off-air exclusive event.
Back to Clare.
With special guests to Croke Park.
Oh! We're on the pitch. On the pitch.
We're in
it's
the
like
Hogan,
Taylor Swift.
We're in the Hogan Stand Suite, which has an unbelievable view of the pitch. So we've got a good view of the pitch. It's going to be absolutely unreal.
The football pod are going to Croker at All-Ireland final week. Oh my God.
It's magic.
Colin Mohick is out in the office there showing me his little gifts that you've brought back from Wimbledon. Kathleen, we just want to mention before we get into that slot, people are commenting on the tickets for tonight.
Yeah, so the Zambia game, there was like 1,500-ish ticket or seats that weren't filled in the stadium, and I've asked the FAI about it a couple of times and they're not fully sure what's happening, but I was told that there are multiple groups of people that are allocated tickets and not turning up. So just to say to if anyone does have tickets for tonight, and if you can't use them, that's fine, to get on to someone. There's plenty of people still looking for tickets there, but it would be really nice to see Tallaght Stadium properly sold out, because the game itself has been sold out for weeks now. So if you have a ticket, turn up. If not, get on Twitter. There are loads and loads of people looking for tickets.
Yeah, absolutely. Cup yourself on. If you bought a ticket, go to the match or give it to someone. Jesus. 8:57 AM. News Talk's tech correspondent Jess Kelly, how are you?
I'm great, how are you?
Keeping well. You're wearing green for Wimbledon as well. This is like the theme that we should have been told about this morning, I guess.
Yeah.
Colin Mohick is extraordinarily jealous. I called him a traitor yesterday for appearing on the PM show. He's just jealous today.
Yeah, I felt I don't do emotions very well, but I felt bad for once. The day that I said to Colin that I was going to Wimbledon, I could see his little heart break.
Look at the head. Look at the actual head.
The amount of times he told me to F off over the last 2 weeks since I found out I was going is a bit sensational, so I brought him back some treats just because I felt so bad.
No, that's only right. He's a mug.
I got a
earring. Magazine. Oh wow.
The official programme.
Yeah, I'd say the merch isn't cheap over there either.
Well, look, you know, when you're on the big books, you know, I wasn't on a junket. I was doing journalism.
Sorry, of course. Well, you can journalism on junkets as well.
The merch shop in Wimbledon is kind of hilarious. The stuff you can buy there, like, so you know they have the official towels. You can get that sort of stuff, but you can actually buy like full tennis outfits.
People were doing that.
Yeah, like buying them and like changing in them in the shop and then coming out wearing their full tennis gear. Like, it's
I'd
so
probably
bizarre.
do that. That's
I could see you doing that.
Yeah. Do many stags? Is a stag and hen location, or is it too like posh?
It's not as notionsy as I thought it was going to be, because I'd never been before and I was so excited to go. The whole thing is, the operation is just run so well. I think it's very difficult to get the access to the tickets. There were thousands of people yesterday morning queuing in Wimbledon Park hoping to get a return ticket. So actually what you guys were just talking about there by Tallaght Stadium, so say if I went yesterday morning to Wimbledon and I stayed for like an hour, I could then scan my ticket on the way out and they would then resell my ticket so somebody else could get access. That's the good thing about this.
They don't want empty seats.
They don't want empty seats, but also it's about giving as many people an opportunity to go as possible.
I was actually talking to someone about this, about Croke Park at the weekend, so they had the double headers. There was a lot of people that went to the first games who maybe didn't have any interest in the second games, but also, or vice versa. Like, it would have been so good if you had someone exactly like that standing outside rescanning your ticket and then it went on sale and someone could just pick it up.
That's where the tech coming into this to sports as a whole is a really good thing, because it'd be very difficult to do that manually, you know, to take a ticket back, write down 1, 2 and then try and resell them. The fact that it's all done on this tech platform makes it pretty seamless. Like, tech has been ingrained into pretty much every element of Wimbledon now. You know, if you're watching on the BBC and you see the stats on the screen and all the rest.
So quick. I know it's supposed to be quick, but like...
But it's remarkable. So what I was given access yesterday morning at 11:30 to the tech hub of Wimbledon. So I went downstairs beneath the court level. So we were like underground. There's all these secret little tunnels where the players can walk by and the journalists can walk by, so they don't have to like mingle with the public. And
very important like that.
Oh well, look, it suited me down to the ground. But you go in and there are 3 rooms dedicated to using artificial intelligence to analyse pretty much every single element of the game. Like, my brain nearly exploded. So if you download the official Wimbledon app, or if you go to the Wimbledon website, there are different elements that you can interact with. The thing that's different this year is they're using AI commentary. So they're using generative AI to produce commentary.
This is fascinating.
It's bonkers, Shane. insane. Like, it is utterly bonkers to provide insights to the game. So in one of the rooms I was in, I was watching this screen that was analysing one of the matches, and it was tracking in little green boxes every single move that a player made, and it could identify, it was coming up on the screen if it was a forehand or if it was a backhand.
We have on the screen there, likelihood to win. So this is from IBM.
This is IBM. So IBM are the tech partner. They've been working with Wimbledon for 30 years, but obviously as technology has developed, they've started using different things, and they've really embraced AI. So the two key ways are the analysis. They're taking things like, you know, a player's previous performance, as well as, you know, their age, their weight, their data, like all the different elements about them, to try and provide insights and predict who's likely to progress well in the competition. So it can look at who's playing who and how likely, you know, each player is to win in that, and then map it the whole way through the competition. But it's not just based on the obvious stats or, you know, things like their previous 3 or 4 matches. It's also taking what's called unstructured data. So they can scan all across social media, all across news articles, see what's been written about them, see what the sentiment is towards them, and all of this information is meshed together, for want of a better phrase, to create these sort of predictions. But I want to go back to the AI commentary thing, because some people don't like the idea of AI doing our jobs, but the way it works is it analyses games, but it's also giving access to commentary for people to have commentary on games that wouldn't be on some of the show courts. So if you're at a court that's not you know, getting the full BBC treatment, you may not get the insights. Now the AI is able to do it. It's taken a ton of language-based learning, and then it's also just generated voices, so you can choose to have a man or a woman being the AI commentator. It's trained in how to pronounce the names. It's also trained,
which is the toughest part of a tennis commentary, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I would say so. And also it's been given like a proper like posh British accent as well, to be in keeping with the tone of Wimbledon. But it is incredible when you see what it can do. The only thing that's missing from it is, you know, if you are someone who watches Wimbledon every year, you know, the like little bit of flair or colour that you get from a John McEnroe or someone like that who's in the commentary box. You don't have that, because it's purely factual.
There's no crack.
It'd be kind of funny if like it got to a stage where it observed so many matches that it could start recounting other things that it commented on.
That's what it can do.
Yeah.
So, you know, like I often see, like, you know, if Nathan's at a match or whatever, he'll post a picture of his little notebook with his highlighter and his 7 different colour pens and all the rest.
Child, basically.
His little OCD system, which makes me really happy. AI doesn't need to do that. It doesn't need the notebook, because it's learning the entire time. Right. So not only can it take in all of the data from everything that's ever happened in a player's life, never mind just their career, it can then also say, well, half an hour ago this happened. So it's learning the entire time, and it's taking a lot of the pressure off you know, the individuals trying to collate all this data. But I know that some people are slightly allergic to the idea of too much technology coming into sport. Like obviously Hawkeye's been there for quite a while, and some of the insights produced by IBM for this use the Hawkeye, but it's gone, you know, 17 layers above that now in terms of sophistication.
Is it quick, as in, is it literally as you're watching, is the commentary as quick as it would be with humans?
No, so at the moment what's happening now is that the AI commentary is for the highlights of games. So if you sit down at 7 o'clock tonight and you want to watch back the action, it does take a bit of time to generate. Also, what's really cool is within the app, if there are certain players that you're really interested in, you can select them as your favourites, and it'll compile your own little highlights reel. So it's like your own version of, you know, and this is going to come for every sport. So if you can curate your own version of Match of the Day or whatever it is, where you're getting insights into the matches and to the players and the athletes that you're most interested in, like, it's all happening. So
for people who watch Wimbledon, people will know that obviously centre court and court number 1 and 2 are the main ones, and then you've got essentially there's 6 show courts. And outside of that, you'd be doing well to recognise some of the names on the 6 show courts. But for some people who want to see some of those matches or players, this technology will come in useful.
Yeah, and the other thing with the AI, and they have draw analysis, and then they also have power rankings, their own. I think they ripped you guys off a little bit.
Rooney.
Yeah, watch out, Tommy. But what they do is they're saying that the AI can help identify up and coming talent.
Right.
So because it's looking at the trends, it's looking at people's form and all the rest. So if you are a proper tennis nerd, if you're Colin Buig basically, then you are going to really get the benefit of having all this data. But I just found it utterly fascinating.
I feel like after this lot, Colm's just not going to come into work next week, and we're just going to get a picture of him in Wimbledon queuing outside the gates, being like, I'm ready, guys.
He should give it a go.
Did you have strawberries and cream?
No, the queue was bananas, and I'm too impatient. I did have a Pimm's though for the first time ever.
What is Pimm's?
Do you not have access since your media to the media restaurant?
I wasn't there so I was given a grounds pass.
Oh, okay, yeah. So there's like a special restaurant for all the media that work there.
I saw that downstairs. Yeah,
and like it's class. You get like free strawberries and cream.
I did not get free strawberries and cream. I paid 12 quid for a thing of Pimm's, which was delicious and the most refreshing
thing. What is
thing.
Pimm's again?
I actually don't know. I know that there's a bit of booze, a lot of fruit, and just deliciousness in a cup.
Yeah. Isn't it like it's like lemonade and liqueur or something?
It looks nice. It was
great for the gram.
That's all that matters.
That's all that I was.
It's like a slightly less sweet cider or something.
This here, Pimm's is an English brand of gin-based fruit cup, but may also be considered a liqueur or the basis of a sling or punch. Who knows? First produced in 1823. There you go.
Well, I love that's the most that we've learned from this entire segment.
No, it's so thumbs up or thumbs down for the technology?
Thumbs up, but I would love to know what people think about this type of technology in general coming into sport. It's already been there in terms of like the Masters. It's coming into different sports the entire time at different levels. But I think the thing for me is, because I'm a bit of a data junkie, I love having all this insight, but it's where the technology interrupts the flow of the delivery of the sport and the commentary and all the rest. I don't think it's that invasive in tennis. Like, I get frustrated watching rugby and all the rest when you're going to the TMO for like 25 minutes and it's just like, oh, come on, no one has time for this. So I think it's about striking that balance between benefiting the fan regardless of where they're watching. Also, the other thing is the athletes are now using, like the tennis players are now using some of these insights to learn about their own game as well. So the players can log in, they have their own portal within the app, and they can see how AI assess their performance in a particular match and then learn from that.
Their own stats person, basically.
Essentially, yeah. So I think it's fascinating, but as I said, I'd love to know what the hardcore fans think.
Absolutely. Let us know in the comments. Jess, great stuff. Thanks for popping in as always. Jess Kelly there, News Talk's technology correspondent at 9:08 AM on Thursday mornings, OTB AM, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball. Here are some highlights on the OTB podcast network coming up across today. Andy Mitten was on the show last night talking United's new signings, Mason Mount, the De Gea situation as well. Paul Murphy and James O'Connor previewing this weekend's hurling semi-finals, and the F1 pod with myself yesterday. Great episode yesterday, so you get that in all the podcast places. After the break, Paul Howard's version, an episode of You Had to Be There. During the break, though, a clip from that latest episode of the F1 pod, where I was joined by Bernie Collins, the former head of race strategy for Aston Martin, and motorsport journalist and broadcaster Declan Quigley, talking Lewis Hamilton. Back in a sec.
We're off to the land down under.
We're going to Australia.
What dreams are made of.
It's Galway versus Kilkenny, but not as you know it.
It's the fastest I've ever seen you run in your life, bro.
The Hurling Pod Live is off to the Port Gosh Energy Theatre in Dublin this July, and you're invited.
I'll be joined by my co-host James Kelly and Paul Murphy on the night.
Start the leveler, he'd say, and the tractor is coming after us.
As we debate the highs and lows of the 2023 season and preview the All-Ireland hurling final. Plus, we'll be announcing some more hurling legends to take the stage with us.
It was a ruck, I got confused.
It's happening on July 20th at the Bord Gosh Energy Theatre. It's an exclusive off-air event. Tickets are limited, so don't delay. Go to offtheball.com/events for more.
Bord Gosh Energy, proud sponsors of the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship.
This is what inter-county hurling is it? That's why I should have stayed the rugby.
Hamilton was one of the earliest track limits, I guess, victims of his 5-second penalty, and he was fuming. You could hear him in the car radio, and eventually, we said it earlier, Mercedes chief Toto Wolff intervenes and says, "Lewis, we know the car is slow, please drive it," with a clear sense of irritation in his voice.
He's a great manager, isn't he?
It's certainly entertaining for us, but clearly Hamilton is in a place right now where he is frustrated.
He's fuming, but he's been fuming since 2007. I mean, that's why he's great. I mean, he is just what he is. I think he's the greatest ever. I mean, you can't compare ears and all that sort of stuff, Fangio, Hamilton, but he is just extraordinary. That he's still motivated, still interested. You could, similar applies to Fernando Alonso, but I think slightly breaks my heart to say it, but I think that Hamilton's probably quicker, and I think he is the most remarkable human being. I don't know where he gets the motivation or the interest, but it really matters. And he's absolutely really, really frustrated. And they had a bit of a minging weekend. They dragged a little bit out of it. I think it could come back to them now this coming weekend. We'll see to the marks. But his frustrations, he does express them. He makes himself probably less popular with the casual race fan as a result, even the not so casual race fans. But who cares? He's in the job to win, and he carries his team by badgering them, by hectoring them, by challenging them, by getting annoyed. And he's not the only one. In fairness, I mean, Max Verstappen tends to get a bit grumpy. Again, the aforementioned Fernando Alonso, they're the alpha bunnies, aren't they? They dominate their teams. They own their teams. Again, I mean, that always comes with the codicil that George Russell had a pretty good year last year, but maybe not so strong this year, and it's coming back to Hamilton. Yeah, he's getting older and he's still there. He's still quick.
OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball.
It's so unexpected.
It's one of those you had to be there moment.
You had to be there.
It subsequently genuinely did change everything about my life.
You have to be there.
Yeah, it's the latest episode of You Had to Be There. Delighted to be joined in studio with myself and Kathleen with the author, Paul Howard, of course, creator of Russell Carroll Kelly as well. Paul, how are things?
Brilliant, really good, yeah, great to be here.
This is, it's stressed out a lot of our guests trying to pick 5 sporting events that they've seen
Paul
in person.
was 100% the most organised man. I asked him to do this weeks ago and literally straight away sent me the 5 picks with every single detail about them. I was so impressed. Normally you're hounding guests looking for these, but you were
I was waiting for the call, to be honest.
It's one of those lots of people enjoy. You're looking back at events that you've actually enjoyed.
This was my Desert Island discs, for years. Like I listened to, I have my Desert Island discs there ready, and I had my 5. You Had to Be There's ready as well.
Yeah. So there's no were there ones that haven't? We'll not spoil the 5 just yet, but were there ones just outside the 5 that you?
Well, Katie Taylor. I know everybody picks Katie Taylor, and I picked Katie Taylor, and it's the last time I cried.
Right. In London,
watching sport. I was in a bar in Belfast. I was in the Rock Bar on the Falls Road in Belfast, and I was at the Pubble Festival, and I was asked to read some Russell Carroll Kelly stories at the festival. And Katie Taylor's fight was at some point in the middle of my reading, and I was told beforehand, as soon as the fight starts, we're going to interrupt you. I'll put up my hand. Danny Morrison, who arranged the festival, he put up his hand to stop me from reading, and I had to go and sit down. They pulled the screen down, and we all watched the fight. And as soon as the fight was over, they put the national anthem on. Everybody sang our Ron Naveen. Amazing. And then they pulled the screen back up and went, away you go. And I did the second read. But the emotion of that, it's a long time since, because I wasn't a sports reporter anymore. I could actually be. Yes. I could kind of get invested in it. Just enjoy it. Her story, and where she'd come from, and how she'd. They'd created an Olympic sport because of this unstoppable force, this women's boxer, and I saw Deirdre Gogarty fight years earlier, and I think it was at the National Stadium. People got up and walked out because they couldn't sit and watch women boxing. So to see where Katie Taylor had taken it, it was very emotional for me.
Yeah, we had Deirdre Gogarty in studio here not too long ago. That week of Katie's fight, and she spoke very eloquently about it and how far women's boxing has come in particular. But that's an interesting point. Even when you work in sports media, you see something like Katie Taylor's fight, and you probably after the fight are analysing, how can we cover this? So you can enjoy the fight for what it is at the time, but you're also in the background thinking, how do we cover this? How do we should get her on, get her coach, or whatever.
And when you step away from it, as I did in 2005, you can actually enjoy matches as a fan, enjoy fights as a fan.
What a concept.
And be totally partisan for someone or against someone, and it's that was one of the most exciting things for me about I mean, I hated giving up sports journalism because it was a job I loved, but there was, especially the first few years afterwards, I went, I can actually go to an Ireland football match and boo,
if I want. Exactly. No Liverpool Football Club appearances on this on these 5, which I was surprised at. Very surprised at. Anyone follows Paul on Twitter will know that Liverpool Football Club appears often enough.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, there was lots of things involving Liverpool have moved me. Like the first, I started following Liverpool really because they won the 1977 European Cup final, and I was allowed to stay up late. So I kind of thought, you know, I'll be a Liverpool fan because I can stay up late. And the following year they beat Bruges in the final, and right the way up to the final I was allowed to stay up late for every single match. So that's why I started following Liverpool. So those matches mean a lot to me, and obviously the Champions League finals since then, but it just so happened that I had 5 events that moved me more.
Even more so. Well, you have 5 strong picks. We'll get into them now. So we'll start in chronological order, I guess. 1989, the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Final at Croke Park. This is Tipperary against Antrim. Tip 424, Antrim 3 goals and 9 points, and Nicky English a performance, because Antrim scored 3-9, but Nicky English himself scored the exact same as them, 2-12, which kind of sums up his performance that day. Man of the match, undoubtedly.
Yeah, I had absolutely no interest or knowledge in hurling, none whatsoever. Growing up, it wasn't on my horizon at all. I was a football fan and that was it. But I went to Irish college, and I made a load of friends from Tipperary, and they were always talking about hurling. And I remember we were in Murriock in Kerry, County Kerry, and we climbed up a mountain. Well, it's probably a hill in Kerry terms, but it felt like a mountain because it took us about an hour to get to the summit. And it was so we could get reception to listen to, it might have been a Munster hurling final or an All-Ireland semi-final. And I remember sitting with the lads, and I have a photograph of me with the lads sitting on the top of this hill listening to this match on the radio, which just seems like such an eternity now.
Yeah.
So one of the lads, a guy called Tony McKenna, who is from Borrisacane in North Tip, he had a ticket for the All-Ireland final, which was wasted on me, absolutely wasted. The 1989 All-Ireland final. He said, "Do you want to come?" I said, yeah, I'd love to come. And I was on the hill. We were on the hill. He was with a bunch of his friends as well, and there was a crush on the hill.
Right.
And this was a few months after Hillsborough, so there was real worry. I mean, I was worried going to sports matches after Hillsborough.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of a crush on the hill, so we said, let's go down the canal end. And we moved down to the canal end, and we're standing there, and there's a crush there. And I don't know whether they opened the gates or whether we climbed the fence. I think we may have climbed over, but the stewards didn't stop us. We all got on the pitch, and I was behind the goal on the pitch. I mean, that seems inconceivable in this day and age that they would allow fans to sit behind the goal. But I'm sitting there on the pitch with the lads.
For the match itself?
For the match, for most of the second half, actually. And if you can find it on the clip on YouTube, the incident I'm talking about now, you can see us all, the banks of fans behind the goal on the pitch.
Like a school sports day.
Blocking out the advertising hoardings. And anyway, this particular, I was experimenting at the time with not wearing glasses. I was going through a sort of vain period in my life.
Thought it was cooler.
Yeah, I thought it was cooler not to have glasses. But the problem was I couldn't see. Like, I couldn't see anything, right?
Especially something like hurling as well.
Hurling, you're looking for the little schlitter. Yeah. Anyway, Aidan Ryan, and I know it was Aidan Ryan because I watched it back on YouTube, hit this diagonal pass across the field, probably 50 metres. It was unbelievable. But all I saw behind the goal was this blur in the distance, and then this schlitter dropping. And Nicky English caught it. And it was cross body, caught it like, backhand.
Yeah.
I thought he caught it on the full, but I've watched it since, and it bounced.
Right, half
and
volley.
He caught it and bang into the back of the net, and it was just that perfect, like the perfect golf swing or the perfect knockout punch. It's like whack.
Yeah.
You could hear it into the back of the net. The net. It's just a dream, a sort of dream goal. You want to see the net rustling and everything, and we ran onto the pitch, and I don't remember. I mean, I was from Dublin. I had no interest in hurling, but it was just like
you get kind of wrapped up in it.
Yeah.
I got when I watch riot scenes now on television, I think of that moment. Like, it was just all these lads with these sort of yellow and blue flat caps. They were in fashion at the time. They ran on the pitch, and I just sort of ran with them. And it was Nick English's second goal, I think, and it was the last meaningful moment of the match.
Yeah.
And it sort of crowned this performance. I mean, Antrim weren't in the match at all. It was a coronation rather than a sporting competition. But Nicky English, I mean, it was extraordinary what he did. Just to watch it fall, and to catch watch it. Like, you know, I mean, you must. I mean, Nicky English did that loads of times, but I mean, you know, most hurlers must dream of scoring a goal like that.
Doesn't mean it's an easy skill though to do, because like you watched Nicky English, and he was slightly before my time. When you watch videos back, you're like, this guy was silky smooth and would look at home possibly in today's game as well. I know the game is completely different in many ways than it was. Yeah. But like as you say, that second goal, the game was over. It was the biggest winning margin in the final apparently since Antrim's last final appearance, which had been 1943, and even Tipperary, like I think it was 18 years since they'd won Liam McCarthy, so they were ending a famine. Yeah. But to do it in that style, and Nicky English.
And Nicky, like he was just ultra cool as well. Like, you know, when I watched the clips back, like the 80s, because I'll be looking at the 1880s, it felt that remote from today. But he had that sort of Patrick Swayze from Ghost hair and everything. Like his hair didn't seem to move. It was sort of perfectly parted.
Real green gel. Yeah. It was amazing. We'll move on to the next one. That was an extraordinary one. Tip fans, I think, will be right on board with the nostalgia for that one. This one's right up my alley as well. A bit of snooker for all of you snooker fans out there. This was Alex Higgins against Dennis Taylor. This is the Benson and Hedges Irish Masters. Even the fact that it's sponsored by a cigarette company is crazy to think of nowadays, but back then I guess that was the done thing. The Irish Masters at Goffs in Kildare, 1990. Spoke to Ronnie O'Sullivan recently, and I can't remember if it was off air or on air, but he spoke so like candidly about Goffs and how much the players loved Goffs as a venue. Just and you said it on air beforehand, how close the fans were to the actual arena and the table.
I mean, people who were there in Kildare, it was the heyday of snooker, and the venue was perfect because it was the old Bloodstock Arena, and it was round. The arena was round, and they just sort of put up this sort of wooden frame around in the middle and left enough room for the players to have a bit of elbow room, and then you were there, and you could, if you sneezed, it was no matter where you were in the arena, it was loud enough to make a player stop. There was no mobile phones in those days. I certainly didn't have one. But if you were terrified to shift in your chair in case it put the players off, and you could literally reach out and touch them. So the intimacy of I don't think I was ever at a sporting event that had that kind of intimacy, that you felt that close.
How big would the crowd have been?
Not big, maybe sort of 400, 500 people. So it was sort of small enough that, you know, you could make eye contact with other fans and kind of go, you know, it felt like you know, when you go to a gig, when somebody does an unplugged gig for 400 people in Vicar Street, a big star, that's what it felt like. It felt like you were seeing these players who were used to big venues, but you were seeing them in a small venue, and it was an extraordinary. The Irish Masters was an extraordinary tournament, and it was just very much of its time.
I'd love to see it return, because I never got the chance to see snooker at Goffs, but it's definitely one that was on my to-do list if it had stayed around. Alex Higgins and Dennis Taylor, like, you think, two Northern Irish snooker players, they must have got on very well, but for people who don't know the backstory, these two lads didn't quite see eye to eye. We know Alex was a bit of a maverick and a character.
Yeah, I mean, they did at the start. I think when Alex Higgins went to England first to try to make it as a snooker player, Dennis Taylor set him up with a flat and, you know, rented him a television. Remember the days of renting televisions? Dennis Taylor rented a television for Alex Higgins to make this place a little more homely. So they were close at one point, but they fell out over the years. I think it was a personality thing. I think I mean, Alex Higgins at that point was, let's be honest, he was unhinged at that point, you know, with the especially with the drink and the, you know, whatever else. We were seeing the end of Alex Higgins, really, and it was really, really sad in those years to witness it, but it was compelling as well, because you never knew what he was going to do. He had this hyperactive energy about him. He was one of the few people I ever saw who could walk into a room and immediately change the energy of the room just by walking in, and it wasn't usually dark for the energy. Best. People went quiet when he walked into a room. I remember years later, Liam Gallagher walking into a room, and I kind of felt the same energy from Liam Gallagher in that stage.
Unpredictability, isn't it? You don't know what they're going to do.
The unpredictability, it was, the hyperactivity, the one word from this man and it could all kick off. That's what you felt about Higgins. And before, in March 1990, Dennis Taylor and Alex Higgins had played together on the Northern Ireland World Cup team. There was a World Cup tournament in March. And there was a row about, at the time they said it was about prize money, but I think it was more than that. I think, Taylor wanted to hog the table, Higgins wanted to hog the table, and Taylor was saying, well, this is my match, and Higgins said, no, I'm gonna go and make up for my loss in the last match. And anyway, they lost, and there was a huge row, and during the course of the row, the troubles had never ever come up between them. Both Taylor and Higgins had left Northern Ireland before the start of what we know as the modern troubles. So it had never really been an issue between them. And Higgins said, the next time you go back to Northern Ireland, I'm going to have you shot. And Higgins was from Sandy Row, and Dennis Taylor was from Coal Island. And I had never really thought about their religious affiliations before. I actually, my own prejudices, I thought it was the other way around.
Yeah, sorry, and you're all right. Like, because a name like Taylor, we were even saying this morning, you'd think was of a Protestant background, but not. Yeah, and then Higgins, I just presumed he was anyway. But so it never came up as an issue until this, and it all blew up. It was all over the papers, and the following week they ended up in the quarterfinal together at the Benson Hedges Irish Masters in Goffs, and I went with a friend of mine. And again, it's the closeness, it's the intimacy, the tension. I don't remember a single thing about the match. I don't remember a shot. I don't remember a break. I had to check the score. I had to go online to find out that Dennis Taylor won 5-2. 5-2, yeah.
So you were saying to me that you had a headache for about 2 days afterwards, just because you were concentrating so much on the moment.
I had this migraine, and like I said to you, you're sitting there and you're trying not to move anyway. Like if you're at a football match or a rugby match, you're up and down and all the rest. But snooker, you're frozen in the seat like that, and you're tensing the whole time. But this was a tension I'd never ever experienced. I was there as a fan, and I got this migraine right the way across my shoulders and neck. I never ever get migraines, but it was from just the tension
and the build up to the match as well, the backdrop to the match, I suppose.
The fact that they both hit each other. You could smell it in the air. It was, the atmosphere. It was so dark. It was amazing, but it was amazing to be there. There was probably 400 or 500 people there. And
how did they interact with each other in the moment?
Well, that's the amazing thing, because that's all any of us watched, and because none of us watched the snooker. We just watched it. It was like people watching, and you're looking at, they didn't look at each other at all. They did. Alex Higgins especially just refused to make eye contact, and Dennis Taylor, there was a bit of that sort of challenging stare going on, but Higgins just didn't make eye contact at all. And the other great thing about Goffs was you'd sort of spill out into a corridor and you'd find yourself backstage with players.
Security was high, obviously.
The security was non-existent, and it was a brilliant event. But that match in particular, I'll never forget it. It's just the most stressed I've ever been, the most worked up I've ever been. And there was a little bit of me was pulling for Higgins, because if you're sports fans generally love a comeback story, and that would have been such a great comeback story. But what I didn't realise at the end was that I was witnessing kind of end stage Higgins.
Demise.
He was never the same after that. He got banned for threatening Dennis Taylor and assaulting a press officer, and he never came back again. He was kind of a sad case after that. It was really awful to watch.
Yeah, big time. I think Ken Doherty told the story about working as an usher at Goffs when he was a kid, and Alex Higgins came up to him before a match and said, if I ask you for an orange juice, I mean vodka orange juice, and if I ask you for a vodka orange, that means double. So I think he wrote that story in his book, but it's just brilliant. Like Higgins probably throughout the match drinking these vodka orange juices. It was a great pick. Definitely that's an event that only 400 people can say they were at it, but no doubt there's probably 4,000 or 40,000 out there who say they were.
Like all the greats.
Exactly. The next pick, Paul, is another brilliant one. Steve Collins versus Chris Eubank. This is at Mill Street in Cork in 1995 for the WBO middleweight and super middleweight titles. A really famous event. You think of the Páirc Uí Chaoimh fight later the year, but the Mill Street one was just
Mill Street was it. Mill Street was it because it just had everything going for it. Like, it was Paddy's weekend. It was the 18th of March. It was in the Green Glens Arena in Mill Street where the Eurovision had happened.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that this fight wouldn't be in London, that it would be in this remote part of Ireland, like, you know, it was the circumstances behind it were bizarre.
Yes.
You know, Steve Collins. He'd want to fight Eubank for years, and I think Eubank was kind of avoiding him because Steve was in that what they call in boxing the who needs him class, in that he's going to give you a really, really good fight and there's nothing in it for you. You know, there's no money in it. Like, Steve really wasn't a big draw, and there's a chance he could beat you.
Yes.
So I think Eubank had avoided him, but Eubank had fought Ray Close twice, two really, really controversial fights, because like a lot of Eubank fights in that period, they were really close and he got the decision, and at least
often
one of
12 rounds as well.
Yeah, at least one of them I thought Close beat him.
Yeah.
And so Close was awarded a third fight just off the back of how controversial these previous two the decisions were. And then Ray Close, there was a problem with a brain scan, and Steve was offered the fight in January, very late.
2 months out, literally.
2 months out. And I was working with Steve on a book at the time, and I'd spent probably the previous year, I'd probably spent 3 or 4 months with him in Romford in Essex, and Steve had this idea. He wanted to do a book like Eamon Dunphy's Only a Game, where it was kind of a year in the life of a professional boxer. And the start of the book, he beat Chris Pyatt to win the WBO middleweight title, and that was the start of the book. And then the book was going nowhere. Pyatt was a real sort of so what kind of moment, because it was a world title, but no one really rated Chris Pyatt in world terms. And then Steve was trying to defend the title, and we went to Hong Kong in October of 94, and the fight got called off the day beforehand because the fighters' purses weren't paid. And then his fight was rescheduled against an American called Lonnie Beasley. It was rescheduled for Boston in December, and Steve got sick and got a throat infection, so it was called off again. So this was the book. The book was in ruins. And then in January, Steve rang me and said, I've been offered the Eubank. So suddenly,
bit of a twist on the book.
Yeah, and so it suddenly. So I was personally
all the stuff that came
excited.
Before kind of made it more of a story as well.
Yeah, and I was personally excited. I was like this is the book now, you know. So the fight itself, Steve disappeared for about 6 weeks, and I think this is why, you know, there was all this intrigue around the fight. Steve disappeared to one of the Canary Islands with Tony Quinn, of Tony Quinn Health Foods Shops, and who was practicing hypnotism at the time, and you know, he had all these kind of relaxation tapes and everything, and Steve disappeared off with him, and there was no contact with anybody. I mean, I know Roddy. I did Roddy Collins, his brother Roddy's book as well, and you know, Roddy said I had no contact with him at all while he was away, and he came back, and he was like, Steve was a basket case when he went away. Like, he was physically broken down. He kept getting colds, and you know, his head wasn't in it and everything. And Tony Quinn, whatever he did, remade him out there, but they came back, and there was this story doing the rounds that Tony Quinn had hypnotized him so he wouldn't feel pain, right, in the ring. And this was really serious, and Chris Eubank got really, really spooked by it, because pain is your body's way of saying the fight's over.
I'm out, yeah.
And Eubank had experience in the ring where he fought Michael Watson, and Michael Watson had ended up with life-changing injuries from this fight, from this knockout punch that Chris Eubank pulled from nowhere at the end of the fight, which he was losing. And then a few weeks before this Collins Eubank fight, Nigel Benn had fought Gerald McClellan, and Gerald McClellan ended up, you know, with life-changing injuries as well. So boxers and injuries in the ring was very much in the news when Steve arrived back and said, I'm not going to feel any pain. And I think it really, really spooked Chris Eubank. The fight turned, I mean, Steve Collins fought brilliantly, which I was expecting because I'd been following his career right from the start. He'd fought some of the toughest boxers in America, like Mike McCallum, Paul McPeak, Kevin Thornton. You know, he'd done his apprenticeship, and this was his moment. But Steve put Eubank down in the 8th round with a body shot, and Eubank got back up. But he looked beaten. He was gone. And then the fight turned on this moment in the 10th round, where Eubank came out at the very, very start of the round, walked across the ring and nailed Collins with a right. I mean, it was an unbelievable punch, which Eubank was always capable of. That's what made the fight so exciting, that Eubank could be battered and still pull out a fight-winning punch. He did it against Watson. He did it against Nigel Benn. Collins went down. He got up. I mean, he looked okay, but that's the moment to charge in and finish a fight, you know, when a fighter's hurt. And Eubank didn't. He stood back and he started dancing. And that was always a thing. People always said Eubank had because of firstly the Watson fight, but then later on watching what happened with Gerald McClellan, he'd kind of lost his appetite for that kind of destruction, that thing that requires you to rush in all fists blazing and finish a fight. He just couldn't do it. And Roddy and I, we argue all the time about this. Roddy reckons that Eubank knew he'd hit Steve with his toughest punch, it was hardest punch, and Steve still got up. Yeah, and that's why he stood back. Yeah, I personally, I think he just didn't have it in him anymore. But anyway, it was an amazing occasion, especially because I was writing the book and I thought, now we have a book.
Hallelujah.
What I remember about it was, apart from being Paddy's weekend, the Gardaí were the security on the night. So if you look at pictures from the fight, it's just guards everywhere. Like when Steve was walking to the ring, he's surrounded by about 300 Gardaí. It's like he's going to court. Yeah. But the other thing I remember is that most of Dublin's gangland criminals were there as well, you know. Right. So there's this kind of uneasy mix of law and order and criminals in the audience. It was crackling the atmosphere down there, you know. The second fight at Páirc Uí Chaoimh in September, it wasn't a great fight. It was, and it definitely didn't have that atmosphere. Remember at this point when Steve fought Eubank in that first fight, Eubank had never been beaten before, and he was Barry Hearn's darling, even though Steve was managed by Barry Hearn as well, but he was Sky Sports' darling as well. Like he was the first £1 million a fight fighter in England, and unbeaten. And a lot of the fights, it was kind of felt that, you know, he should have lost that one, but he always seemed to get the benefit of the doubt.
Everything about that pick is amazing. You've got the guards, you've got the Paddy's weekend, the hypnotism. I mean, just the venue in Mill Street as well. It's just one of those incredible
Walkman as well. Steve was sitting in his corner before the fight with like what the Walkman headphones, and I don't mean the Beats, you know, those big ones, or even the little buds that they have now. He had like orange. Do you remember the ones which are little Sony Walkman? Like they were sort of orange foam headphones, and the hood over them. You know, it was amazing. Like, you know, especially the drama around it really contributed to it.
We're bang out of time, but we've got two picks, and maybe there's one of them you have more graw for than the other, but two Cork picks. Sonia O'Sullivan Olympic 5,000 metre final in Sydney in 2000, and of course Roy Keane's performance against the Dutch in that World Cup qualifier in Lansdowne in Dublin in 2001. Are there either of these that stands out more so than the other for you?
Well, I think Sonia, that was my first Olympics, and when you want to become a sports journalist, it's usually because something has moved you in your childhood, and for me it was the Olympics. I always wanted to go to from the time I watched the 1980 Olympics and the 84 Olympics on television, I wanted to be a sports journalist. So Sydney 2000 was my first Olympics. I remember being at the opening ceremony, and you know, 110,000 people in this incredible stadium in Sydney, and John Williamson singing Waltzing Matilda, and everybody singing along, and I was in tears, you know, and it was amazing. But that night in the stadium, Sonia, I mean, I'd followed Sonia's career, you know, which was, she always looked so assured until 1996, and then she became a totally different athlete. You never knew. She was unbeatable up between 92 and 96, and then after the Olympics in Athens, from that point on, she, you know, obviously, you know, she was disappointed at the Olympics in Athens, or in Atlanta. It was a disaster for her, and then 97, I would cover the World Championships in Athens, and it was exactly the same. You kind of thought she's finished. And then she came back and she won the World Cross Country Championships, the double, in 2000. But we still didn't know going to Sydney. Her form was up and down all that summer. We didn't know where she was. And she won silver. I mean, I think it should have been bronze. I think it should have been gold. Gabriela Szabo, who won the race, there's always going to be a shadow over Szabo. And in my mind, there's always an asterisk against Szabo's name because she retired from athletics 3 years later after this scandal in which Active Vegan, this drug that's very similar to EPO, was found in the boot of her car, which was being driven across the French border, where she had her training camp in France, and border police stopped the car and found this Active Vegan, and a teammate of hers said it's mine, it's not for Gabriela Szabo. But there will always be a question mark over Szabo. So in my mind, Sonia won gold, but it was an extraordinary performance from her.
Yeah, quite incredible. We've no time literally for the last pick with Roy Keane, but I guess the Overmars tackle setting the scene that day just led to. It's been in a few of our choices, to be fair. I think Roy Keane and Katie Taylor have been the two that have appeared most often. Which is fair
I think
enough.
If you were there at Lansdowne Road that day, that's the moment. Even more so than the 2002 World Cup for me.
Yes,
that was the moment, beating Holland, because it wasn't our usual 1-1 draw. We didn't win 1-1 like we usually did. We beat Holland.
Finally
won
10
men.
Yeah, exactly. Great picks, Paul. One of my favourite episodes, I think. To be fair, it's just incredible, and the fact you had a snooker one in there as well, just right up my own street. Fantastic, really good stuff. That is Paul Howard's version of You Had to Be There.
It's so unexpected.
It's one of those you had to be there moments.
You had to be there.
It subsequently genuinely did change everything about my life.
You had to be there.
Great stuff. If you've missed any of Paul's version and episode of You Had to Be There, you'll get it on the youtube.com/off the ball, and of course wherever you get your podcasts as well. As well as that, don't miss all the action in Rugby Daily today in your OTB podcast network, bringing you everything you need to know about rugby. Get your favourite local restaurants delivered to your door with Deliveroo. Just open up the app, browse some great offers, take your pick, and they will take care of the rest. Deliveroo, food, we get it. On tomorrow's show, Aisling O'Reilly will join me in the studio. We'll have all the reaction from Ireland versus France tonight at Tallaght Stadium. We'll have our second hurling semi-final preview, Clare's Brendan Bugler and Kilkenny's Kieran Joyce. Connacht out-half legend Jack Carty will be on the show, and plenty more besides. Right now though, Tim Vickery from last night's show on Carlo Ancelotti becoming the Brazil manager from next year. Have a terrific Thursday.
Max, so Carlo Ancelotti continues to have one of the truly great football careers as a player and as a manager. It's outrageous. And now it seems he's adding coach of Brazil to his CV. Very happy to say Tim Vickery is with us. Hello, good to talk to you.
Lovely to be here. The operative words there were, it seems.
Go on.
Well, we know that Brazil's FA want Carlo Ancelotti, and we know that they think that Carlo Ancelotti will be taking over in a year's time, but we haven't heard any of this from Carlo Ancelotti. Nor can we really, because he's under contract with Real Madrid. He's said that he wants to respect that contract. That contract has another year, although there's talk in Spain at the moment about Real Madrid giving him an extra year on top of that. So he's not free to enter into an arrangement to sign a pre-contract until the last 6 months of his existing one, which would be in January. There's still some things to work out. Who's going to be on his coaching staff? And there's a big one coming down the line. Where's he going to be based? Now, this goes a little bit under the radar screen, but Argentina's coach, Lionel Scaloni, just won the World Cup. He lives in Spain. Now, that makes a lot of sense. You're close to where all your players are. Would Brazil allow Ancelotti to be based in Europe? That's a tough one. That's a tough one. This is an appointment. Appointing a foreign coach really puts the cat amongst the pigeons in Brazil, and so we're not there yet. And what they've done now, putting in a stand-in, I think probably complicates matters even further.
Well, it's an odd way of doing business, because I can't move but for seeing quotes from the chief of the Brazilian FA talking about Carlo Ancelotti.
Yeah, true. But you can move without coming across quotes from Carlo Ancelotti talking about taking the Brazil job.
Well, that's true. I presume, you'd have a better feel for the Brazilian FA chief than I. Would he be so inclined as to take a bit of a kite and just go with a half an eyebrow lift from Carlo and say, well, that's that deal done, or is he a fairly reliable type?
Well, they've been courting him for a while, and they think that they're there. But as I say, what they're doing at the moment with the stand-in complicates things, because effectively I think they haven't appointed a stand-in for Ancelotti. I think they've appointed a rival to Ancelotti.
So this is Fernando Diniz.
It is, yes. Now, I suspect here that the original idea, there was a caretaker coach, Hannon Menezes, who was the coach of the under-20 team. And I suspect that the original idea was, let's keep him in charge for a year. But that's run into the problem of results. With his under-20 team, Ramon's Brazil, they were eliminated in the World Cup at that level by Israel. And with the senior team, they lost to Morocco in March, and they got hammered by Senegal a couple of weeks ago. So that made Ramon a difficult sell to be the stand-in coach. I think they decided they needed a name with more credibility, and so they've gone for Fernando Diniz, who is fascinating, and they're really fascinating days ahead. Diniz is a one-off. I mean, the boss of Brazil's FA, Reginaldo Rodrigues, he said yesterday, Fernando Diniz and Ancelotti, they have a similar tactical approach. It ain't so, Joe. I'm going to say it's not so, Joe, because no one has the same tactical approach as Fernando Diniz. He is, and this is what makes him interesting. It means that he keeps getting jobs, although there's not a great deal on his CV. He's a one-off. He does things his way. He's never been an assistant. He was a coach. He was a player. He's also a trained psychologist. And from a player and a trained psychologist, he became a coach. And the way his teams play is fascinating. And they build out from the back, which has led to, this is Guardiola. It isn't. Huge differences. The Guardiola school, the kind of positional school, everything is kind of drilled. You know, you don't have players on the same vertical level. You don't have players on the same horizontal level, meaning that everyone's at an angle from everyone else. That's the positional thing, and it means that the man on the ball has a guarantee of a number of options of pass. Fernando Diniz is absolutely anarchic, off the cuff. There's no positional responsibility. Go and play as you see it. It's like a huge extension of street football. One of his things, as a psychologist, I think, he thinks the players are always capable of more. Mm-hmm. You know, and even the most lumbering centre-back in professional football was the king of his street. And you can get more from them. And so his teams, they tend to play with very little structure. They're fascinating to watch. You know, they'll bring everyone over to one side of the field and maybe leave one player on the other side of the field and play their little short passing movements and then maybe go for a switch. But there isn't anything like the structure of a team that there is in, say, the Guardiola model, which makes them fascinating to watch, also makes them very vulnerable. They can concede. It can leave the defence exposed when they lose possession of the ball. So he's a one-off. He's not in the same mould of Ancelotti. He's in the mould of Fernando Diniz and no one else.
I have to laugh here because this is not what I was expecting you to say on several fronts. Can I just tell you what your chief of the Brazilian FA is saying, alongside the fact that Carlo Ancelotti is going to be the next manager in 2024? Yeah. So of Fernando Diniz, who sounds like an interesting chap, I have to say, the Brazilian FA head says that Fernando Diniz's game plan is almost similar to that of the coach that will be taking over at Copa America, Ancelotti. I.e., we've picked Diniz because he is so similar to Ancelotti, the players won't even notice the change. There'll be no great transition. This is just like, that is not what you're selling me here, Tim.
Fernando Diniz, he's doing his initial press conference as we speak. So I've had to come away from it to for the dubious pleasure of talking to your good self.
Yeah.
And he won't answer questions about Ancelotti. Won't do it. Not his game, mate. Don't know him. Never spoken to him. I'm only getting so. As I went back to what I said at the start. What they've done, they haven't chosen a natural stand-in. They've chosen a rival. Because Denise was a rival for the position. He's a stand-in for no one. Having him combine the two jobs, because he's coach of Fluminense, who have, since the hype around Fernando Diniz really exploded, they've had a bad time. 2 wins in the last 12 games. And some would say, I mean, I've been at some of those games. I was at the last home game, and many supporters of Fluminense, they love the style of play, but they say it's always got a built-in sell-by date. It's a method of play. It's based on the connections, on the human connections between the players. And it's something that needs intensive work on the training ground that he doesn't have. And this is the thing that all international coaches complain about. You know, you've only got, with World Cup qualifiers, they've got 6 rounds of World Cup qualifiers this year. You've got a day's training. So it'll be fascinating to see how he copes with that. But also, being coach of Fluminense puts him in a difficult position, because it means that almost every game now that he plays with Fluminense is like a referendum on the national team coach. It means that it will inevitably be caught up in conflict of interest accusations every time he calls up a squad. You know, why have you called up X player from Y Brazilian club? Is it because you want to tire him out and they're playing Fluminense next, or is it? You know, all of this will be nonsense, but he will be accused of this all the time. And then you've got the real problem here, if he does well. Because if he does well, then, because a lot of people, especially the older ones, really don't like the idea of having a foreign coach for the national team. Yeah. Really don't like it at all. We've got people here, they haven't got anyone with a CV of Ancelotti. And as I say, Deniz's CV is pretty thin. He's won one major title, which was the Rio State Championship. He hasn't got any national titles, anything like that. And he hasn't really come that close. He gets jobs because the football looks so good. When it works, it looks brilliant. If he was ordinary, he wouldn't have got the amount of jobs that he's had based on his track record. But if he does well, then that thing makes things really difficult for Ancelotti. It does. And it will lead to lots of people saying, well, we don't need him anyway.
Ancelotti is, the line around the world, everywhere except in Brazil, it turns out, is that he's coming in for the Copa America 2024 in the USA as well. Diniz will be afforded the start of the World Cup qualifiers from
6 rounds, yes.
September. That includes, match at home to the world champions Argentina in November. So, I mean, if they put on a bit of a show and beat the world champions 2-3-0 and the football is beautiful, Carlo's not packing his bag. That's what you're telling me.
Well, it just makes things complicated. And it almost works more smoothly in the plans of Brazil's FA if they don't do so well, because in large World Cup, everyone in South America is going to qualify. Of the 10 teams, 6 go through automatically, 1 goes into a playoff place. You cannot imagine Brazil failure to qualify. So if they make a mediocre start or a bad start under Diniz, they've always got time to make it up afterwards. If they got off to a good start, then one or two things happen. Number one, then the Ancelotti thing ends up not happening. Or number two, it happens, but Ancelotti is under immediate pressure right from the start because he's taken the job of someone who's done very well before him. It's such a strange way for the Brazilian FA to go about things.
Very strange. Are they being criticised?
Oh, obviously, yeah, massively, massive criticisms from different perspectives. One for going after a foreign coach, one for being willing to wait a year for any coach, no matter his nationality. One line is for bringing in someone who's already got a job and is involved in these conflicts of interests. So lots and lots of criticism being aimed at the way that a Brazilian FA going about this.
So he would be the first foreign coach since 1965.
Well, really, it's the first foreign coach. I mean, they had a Uruguayan for the Copa America of 1925, which was like I think he was in charge for 3 weeks.
Okay.
And a couple of other times they've had him for like one game. And the one in 1965, it's a new stadium being inaugurated. We'll play a game with Brazil, but it's basically a club side. And we'll so really, in terms of any long-term project, this is the first one. And it's certainly the first one since they started winning World Cups. You know, in 65, as I say, was just one game. It's of no relevance whatsoever to the project, long-term project of the Brazilian national team. No, so this is history being made.
Okay, because I think, like anyone following the story, I just read first foreign coach since 1965, and it presumed at least the chap had maybe had a year or two. So why now? Why have they deemed now to be the time to break with basically 100 plus years of tradition?
Number one, they're off the pace. I mean, they keep losing to the European side as soon as they meet them in a knockout stage of the World Cup. Number two, there is a crisis in Brazilian coaching. And the reason that Fernando Diniz, honestly, you can't really think of anyone else.
Okay.
You really can't. I mean, how many... there is no prejudice in top-class European football towards South American coaches. You know, Simeone, Pochettino. Pellegrini is from Chile. He had prejudice in Argentina when he went to work there, you know, and he's been able to, he's coached the biggest teams, you know, he's coached Real Madrid, Man City, and so on. But who was the last Brazilian coach to be successful in European club football? You really can't. You got to go way back. And the last two, the big names who came over, Scolari and Luxemburgo. And Scolari did all right. He did well with the Portuguese national team, but that's a different thing. You get him into club football, Chelsea. No, it didn't work. Luxemburgo at Real Madrid really didn't work. When the only one they've had in a Champions League game for years now is Silvinho, who lasted about 5 minutes at Lyon. And this isn't coincidence. There's no innate deficiency of the Brazilian people preventing them from producing coaches. It's the calendar of the domestic game is awful. There's just too many games. There's no time to train. There's lots of, it's a huge country, so there's lots of travelling. So there's too many games. And there's just too much impatience. The level of anger. I don't know if you saw the story the other night of a Brazilian player who were beaten up by supporters when he's in a kind of sex hotel, and the stakes keep rising and rising and rising. There's no patience. There's no job security, and under these conditions, you just don't produce coaches. They've lost space at home, and almost all the impressive works of coaching in Brazilian football over recent years have been foreign. It used to be very, very rare to find foreign coaches in Brazilian football. Now, lots of Portuguese, there's some Argentines being successful as well. So there's a crisis in Brazilian coaching. And that's why Diniz stands out. Not so much for what he's actually done in terms of conquests, but in terms of the way he plays. And that his stubborn single-mindedness has made him an interesting coach, but it does, as I say, it doesn't make him a stand-in for anyone. Brazil have appointed not a stand-in for Ancelotti. In practice, I think they've appointed a rival to Ancelotti.
Interesting. In the political sphere, I suppose it's been a difficult time in Brazil, and there's been a fervent kind of a nationalism, I presume, which is bubbling away. So has that become a big talking point there, that Johnny Foreigner, like of all things, the Brazilian national side, and Bolsonaro trying to hijack the Brazilian jersey? I presume they're all saying, well, look, this is the problem with this country now. Carlo, who?
Well, that's always there across the board in football. When football is the national football team is the most potent symbol of the Brazilian nation. So that nationalism that tends to transcend all political lines. Although there is, I think. And this has to do with football and not with politics, although they do overlap. There is a generational split here. The younger generation who've grown up with the FIFA manager and all the rest of it, I think they are much less put out by the idea of having a foreign coach than older people. And the group of people who I think who are less concerned, for whom it really isn't an issue, are the players themselves. Because they're all playing under. They love the ones who play or have played under Ancelotti love him.
Yeah.
Vinicius Junior says, I want to work with him, whether it's for Real Madrid or whether it's for Brazil, bring him in. So as far as the players are concerned, it's really not a problem. But it is, I think, perhaps more for the older school than anyone else. But you find lots of this kind of nationalism on the left as well. It's not a monopoly of the right.
Okay, fair point. You mentioned that attack on a player. Corinthians midfielder Luan attacked. It's a kind of strange situation, just by angry fans who didn't like the performances, kind of thing.
Well, and he was, I mean, when they won the Olympics in 2016. He was the one who came. They drew the first games 0-0, and he came into the team for the third game, and he changed the team. He's a really talented player, a link man between attack and defence, and he was being linked with
OTB AM,
the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball.
OTB Rugby.
And that's why those of us that aren't cynical but understand the workings see the world rankings as they currently are as very fallible and very loose.